Chapter 2709. Old Kuan stepped forward and patted his daughter's shoulder gently. "Don't put too much pressure on yourself," Wanro whispered. "Father, I'm just a little worried about your injuries." Old Kuan laughed heartily. "Although my injuries are serious, they won't kill me. Sir, there's a guest." A servant's respectful voice came from outside the hall. "Who would come to visit in the middle of the night?" Before Old Kuan could think about it, the closed door of the hall was pushed open and a tall, thin figure strode in. It was a powerful and dignified man. As soon as he came in, he smiled and said, "Old Kuan, you won't blame me for visiting in the middle of the night, right?" Old Kuan smiled warmly. "I'm happy that you're here. How would I dare to blame you? Quick, invite him in." Wan Ro frowned imperceptibly as she recognized the man. Heng Tianshao. He was an old emperor ancestor from the immortal emperor clan. "Ha ha ha, you're welcome. I'm here for one thing." Heng Tianshao turned his head and said to the outside of the hall, "You guys can come in too." Immediately, a group of people walked in. They were led by 4 to 5 young men and women. All of them were dressed in brocade clothes and had an extraordinary bearing. Their eyes were filled with reservation and conceit. There were more than 10 guards surrounding them, like stars surrounding the moon. Old Kuan was stunned. These are the disciples of my clan." Heng Tianshao raised his hand and pointed at the men and women. "I plan to let them go to the Chaos Demon Sea to see the world. It's best if they can gain experience there. It's bound to be beneficial for their cultivation." Old Kuan's expression changed slightly. "Brother, the Chaos Demon Sea is so dangerous." Before he could finish speaking, Heng Tianshao had interrupted him with a wave of his hand and said, "Old Kuan, aren't you still here? As the saying goes, an unpolished jade is worthless." Even though these young people possess extraordinary cultivation and extraordinary natural talent, they lack true danger and tempering themselves. You only have to bring them along and allow them to experience the dangers of the chaotic demon sea. Old Kuan smiled bitterly and said, "Taoist brother, there's something you don't know. The one leading the group to the chaotic demon sea this time is my daughter. With her ability, I won't be able to bear the consequences if anything goes wrong." A handsome man in a golden robe said coldly, "Senior, are you looking down on us?" The other Heng clansmen also revealed indignant expressions. Old Kuan cursed in his heart, but he quickly smiled apologetically. "I dare not, but, all right, this matter is settled." Heng Tianshao waved his hand and helped Old Kuan make the decision. Old Kuan's expression was uncertain. After a while he said, "Since that's the case, I'll say the ugly words first. If anything happens along the way, don't blame me, Tao brother." Heng Tianshao roared with laughter, and then he glanced at those young men and said, "See that? In the eyes of Brother Kuan, all of you are a bunch of burdens that cause me to worry about. Remember, if you want to be respected, perform well along the way. Don't lose face for the Heng family." After saying that, he looked at Old Kuan and said, "Don't worry, none of the children of my Heng family are mediocre. If anything happens, I won't blame you." Old Kuan sneered in his heart. "You make it sound nice, but if something really happens, I'm afraid you will push all the blame on me." Heng Tianshao looked at the guards and said, "What's more, look at these guards. They are all elders loyal to my Heng family. Which one of them doesn't have the cultivation of an emperor ancestor? With them, as long as we don't encounter an immortal-level powerhouse, it's enough to resolve all dangers." Old Kuan also noticed that the dozen or so guards are not simple. Each of them has the cultivation of an ancestor, and the aura of some of them is even stronger than Heng Tianshao. How can such powerful existences be reduced to guards of a young man? This seems absurd, but in fact it is extremely common among the great immortal emperor clans in the sixth heaven. Because in this world, there are many characters who are eager to join the immortal emperor clans. For example, Nie Qingrong and Ling Qingshu are both emperor ancestors, but when they were in the first heaven, Weren't they also eager to be accepted by the He family and the Hong family to cultivate in the sixth heaven? Therefore, even if their cultivation levels are similar, Heng Tianxiao, a member of the Heng family, has a high status and is far superior to the elders who serve the Heng family. In the end, old Kuan could only compromise and agree. Heng Tianxiao and the others didn't stay for long and quickly left. When only old Kuan and Wan Ro were left in the hall, Wan Ro couldn't help but say, "Father, letting sure you join in this operation is already the limit of my tolerance. Now that the Heng family has sent so many people, how can I take care of them?" Old Kuan took a deep breath, and a cold light surged in his eyes. "You don't have to take care of them, just take them with you. If something really happens, it doesn't matter. At that time, I have my own ways to deal with the Heng family's blame." Immediately, he frowned and said, "However, you still have to be vigilant. It's already the middle of the night, but Heng Tianxiao brought a group of people to the Chaos Demon Sea. This is a bit abnormal." After this reminder, Wan Ro also realized that something was wrong and said, "Father, you said that the Heng family came here for another purpose?" Old Kuan shook his head. "No, it's impossible for them to target us. It's just that they are going to the Chaos Demon Sea not just to train those young people, but for another purpose." "Another purpose?" Wan Ro's clear eyes flickered. "However, you don't need to pay attention to this. Just take the role of a guide," Old Kuan said. Wan Ro nodded. 3 days later, in front of the Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce, a treasure ship floated in the void, and the unique totem mark of the Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce was suspended on the mast. 9 green leaves spread out one by one, forming a circle. 9 is the extreme number. When 9 returns to 1, the Great Way is complete. This totem mark has a special meaning. Lin Sun stood aside and looked at the treasure ship. Peng Tianxiang had left last night and returned to his clan. The killing of Yu Ting was bound to cause a counterattack from the Cloud Veil. Peng Tianxiang needed to discuss this matter with his clan. Not far away, Wan Ro, who had an excellent figure, was still dressed in plain clothes. She looked at Lin Sun, who stood there alone, thought for a while, and raised her hand to summon a maid. "Runyue, from now on, you will accompany and serve Child Shiryu. Remember, don't neglect him," Wan Ro said. The maid was beautiful and wore a well-cut lotus-colored long dress. Her skin was fair and delicate. Hearing Wan Ro's words, she pursed her lips and smiled. "Yes, Mississippi," Wan Ro transmitted her voice, "keep an eye on him. If he does anything unusual, you must tell me immediately." Runyue blinked her eyes and agreed. At that moment, Lin Sun saw the members of the Heng family. In fact, it was hard not to notice them. There were nearly 20 of them, including the guards. They were very eye-catching. "Child, these are the members of the Heng family. This time, they will go to Chaos Demon Sea with us. Look at the golden-robed man in the lead. His name is Heng Xinghai. It is said that he is the 3rd son of the Heng family's leader. The 2 men and 1 woman beside him are his younger brother and younger sister." Runyue came to Lin Sun and introduced them. Her voice was clear and pleasant to the ears. "The Heng family." A strange look flashed in the depths of Lin Sun's eyes. The first imperial ancestor, he killed in the Great Thousand Battles realms, was Heng Tianxiao of the Heng family. It was also from then on that he became enemies with the Heng family. During the years he had been in the eternal true world, the Heng family's forces had always been among the immortal emperors who chased after his life. "Miss Wanru, can we go now?" Heng Xinghai, who was in the lead, asked loudly. He was dressed in a golden robe and had a strong body. He was brave and had an unruly look in his eyes. "Wait a moment," Wan Ro said and turned to look at old Kuan standing in the distance. She said, "Father, everyone is here. You can go back." Old Kuan nodded and said to an old servant beside him, "Old friend, you have to be careful along the way." The old servant's hair was sparse and he was bony. There were 3 terrifying scars on his forehead. They looked like 3 ferocious centipedes lying on the ground. They were hideous and terrifying. His voice was hoarse and low. "Master, I will take good care of Mississippi. Uncle Jiao, let's go." Wanro glanced at the old servant, then at old Kuan. She turned around and walked into the distance. "Everyone, let's go." After a moment, the treasure ship rose into the sky and carried everyone into the sky. It crushed the clouds and gradually disappeared into the distance. Nothing must happen this time. Old Kuan watched the treasure ship disappear. When he remembered what Wanro was about to do, he felt a little worried for some reason. 10 days later, the treasure ship of the 9 Leaves Chamber of Commerce smoothly entered the territory of the Bloody Wind Divine Land. If nothing unexpected happened, they would be able to embark on the journey to the chaotic Demon Sea in another 7 days. That was a long journey that was filled with danger. However, with Wanro leading the way, Lin Sun didn't worry about getting lost. Compared to the boundary ship that traveled in the starry sky, the 9 Leaves Chamber of Commerce's treasured ship wasn't large, but it was comparable to an extremely magnificent palace. Many overlapping spaces had been opened up in the cabin of the ship, and they were covered in layers of restrictive spells. This was the place where Lin Sun and the others lived. In one of the elegantly arranged rooms, Wanro, who was sitting behind the table, put down the jade slip in her hand, rubbed her eyebrows and asked casually, "Uncle Jiao, is Child Sure you still in the room?" "Yes, Uncle Jiao," a bony old servant said in a low voice not far away. "I didn't expect him to be so obedient and cooperative." Wanro was a little surprised. In her expectation, it must be difficult to serve a person who hung around with a noble child like Peng Tianxiang. She was even ready to take the opportunity to teach Peng Tianxiang a lesson if he dared to do anything out of line. She didn't expect that from the moment he set foot on the treasure ship, he would stay in the room and never cause any trouble to the treasure ship. This was beyond Wanro's expectation. Chapter 27:10. On the contrary, it was the actions of the Hung clansmen that made Wanro feel rather annoyed. Some people indulged in debauchery, drinking and singing. Wanro endured it. Some people indulged in debauchery, playing the flute every night. Wanro endured it. Every time they arrived at a place, they would clamor to stop the treasured ship for a short while and go to the city to visit their friends. Wanro still endured it. But there was actually someone cultivating the sword Dao in an unbridled manner on the treasured vessel. The clanging and resounding sword howls resounded, and when sword chi swept out, even the restrictions within the treasured vessel were shaken, causing the entire treasured vessel to be thrown into disorder. This was what Wanro couldn't tolerate. The one who practiced the sword was Hung Xinghai, the leader of the Hung clansmen. It was said that this person was obsessed with sword Dao and would practice the sword whenever he was free. If it was somewhere else, Wanro might admire him. However, on the treasured ship, it was infuriating and repulsive. Wanro had personally gone to remind Heng Xinghai, hoping that he would restrain himself a little and at least not affect the order of the treasured ship. Who would have thought that Heng Xinghai didn't care at all? He still did what he wanted and didn't take Wanro's words seriously. How could Wanro not be annoyed? In comparison, Lin Sun, who had been in seclusion since he boarded the treasured ship, undoubtedly gave people a better impression. "Young miss, bad news." Suddenly, an anxious voice came from outside the room. Wanro was shocked and said, "Come in and talk." A maidservant pushed the door open and said anxiously, "Miss, quickly go to young Master Shi Yu's room and take a look. Young Master Heng Xingwen wants Runwe to drink with him, but Runwe doesn't agree. Heng Xingwen doesn't give in and is furious. He is about to make a move." Wanro suddenly stood up with a cold expression. "This fellow is too presumptuous." Heng Xingwen was the disciple of the Heng clan that had been licentious to the extreme since he stepped onto the treasured vessel, and he indulged in debauchery every night. The 3 female revered elders that served by his side accompanied him to do some indescribable things day and night, causing the treasured vessel to be in a state of chaos. If that was the case, it would have been fine. After all, those unbearable scenes and sounds happened in Heng Xingwen's room and were covered by the restriction power, so it wouldn't affect others. But now, this guy has extended his evil claws towards Runyu. This has crossed Wanru's bottom line. Runyue was her personal maid. She had been arranged to serve Lin Sun since they boarded the ship. But now she was targeted by Heng Xingwen, the lascivious pervert. How could Wanru not be angry? Uncle Jiao, let's go take a look. Wanru immediately headed out of the room. Lin Sun was awakened from meditation by a voice full of anger, helplessness and hesitation. Even though the room was covered in the energy of restrictions, staying within it was equivalent to being isolated from the outside world. So once a mishap occurred while the treasured vessel was flying, it would be utterly impossible to sense it at the first possible moment. In that case, it was very likely that he would fall into a dangerous situation. Therefore, from the moment Lin Sun set foot on the treasure ship, he opened a corner of the room so that even if something unexpected happened, he could react immediately. Because of this, Lin Sun immediately noticed the angry and hesitant voice. It was Runyue. Lin Sun was stunned. This was the Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce's treasured ship. Who would dare to harm Runyue on the ship? Lin Sun spread out his divine sense and instantly captured what was happening outside the room. Slap! A crisp slap resounded. Runyue's fair and beautiful face turned red and swollen. She staggered and fell to the ground. She didn't dare to resist. Her eyes were filled with anger and fear. This is the Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce's treasured ship. Aren't you afraid of offending my miss? She said in a trembling voice. Heng Xingwen's expression was indifferent. His handsome face was full of gloom. So what if it's the Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce? Would they offend me for a lowly servant like you? As he spoke, he grabbed Runyue. His eyes unscrupulously swept over Runyue's graceful figure. He revealed a lustful expression and said, I cultivate the acacia Tao. This young master cultivates the Tao of acacia, which is indescribably wondrous. Which woman who is chosen by me hasn't obtained great benefits from acacia? I don't, Runyue screamed. Her pretty face was full of fear. She wailed, I beg you, please let me go. Which woman that I've set my eyes on dares to refuse like you? Heng Xingwen snorted coldly. He grabbed Runyue's arm and was about to bring her back to the room. In the room, Lin Sun frowned. How dare the Heng family be so unscrupulous? Stop! At this moment, a cold rebuke sounded. The gentle figure of Uncle Jiao walked over from afar. Oh, it's Miss Wanru. Heng Xingwen didn't panic at all. Instead, he looked at Wanru with a frivolous expression and said playfully, Do you want to be a guest in my room? Wanru took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the anger in her heart. She said coldly, Put Runyue down and leave. Otherwise, don't blame me for not giving face to the Heng family. Oh, don't tell me you dare to make a move? Heng Xingwen pretended to be surprised. His eyes were full of ridicule. Miss Wanru is only a servant. Moreover, I'm just having a heart-to-heart talk with her to let her experience the true profundity of acacia. I'm sure she'll benefit greatly from it. Who knows, she might even take the initiative to beg me to have sex with her in the future. Of course, if Miss Wanru is also interested, you can also take this opportunity to experience it. Shut up. Wanru was so angry that she was almost unable to control the rage in her heart. Her eyes were terrifyingly cold. I'll say it one more time. Put Runyue down and leave. She spoke word by word resolutely and coldly. Heng Xingwen's brows raised. He was just about to say something when a clear voice resounded from afar. Xingwen, don't cause trouble. Heng Xinghai, who wore a golden robe, walked over hastily. He first glared fiercely at Heng Xingwen, and then he smiled at Wanru. This brother of mine is dissolute and unrestrained. Moreover, he cultivates the acacia Tao. It's inevitable for him to do some absurd things. I hope Miss Wanru won't blame him. He seemed to be explaining, but his expression was actually not apologetic at all. It was as if he was describing an extremely ordinary matter. Ask him to let Runyue go first. Wanru's expression was icy cold. Hung Xinghai berated, Xingwen, we have to rely on Miss Wanru on this trip. How could you do such a thing? Quickly let her go. Hung Xingwen casually released Runyue and said regretfully, alas, the world's prejudice towards the Acacia Dao is too great. They don't understand how wonderful it is. Mississippi. Runyue rushed to Wanru's side. She was like a frightened deer, with tears in her eyes and shivering. No one knew whether it was because of excitement or fear. Miss Wanru, if there's nothing else, we'll go back to our room. Hung Xinghai laughed heartily. Child Heng, I hope nothing like this will happen again in the future. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that we won't encounter any danger along the way, Wanru said calmly. Hung Xinghai narrowed his eyes slightly, and then he laughed out loud. Then he turned around and left with Heng Xingwen. Watching them leave, Wanru's eyebrows were filled with undisguised disgust. There was a kind of anger in her heart that she had nowhere to vent. She looked at Runyue and then at Lin Sun's closed door. She felt more and more upset in her heart. Biting her cherry lips, Wanru turned around and left. When she returned to her room, she couldn't help saying coldly, Uncle Jiao, if the clansmen of Hing family continue to make trouble, there will be a big mess along the way. Uncle Jiao said in a hoarse voice, Miss, a little impatience will spoil a great plan. These clansmen of Hing family still need us to lead them to Chaos Demon Sea. No matter how presumptuous they are, they won't dare to completely offend us. For the time being, just bear with it. A touch of helplessness appeared on his face, and he shook his head. Wanru also knew what Uncle Jiao said was true, but the hatred in her heart couldn't be eliminated. She gritted her teeth and said, And sure you, it happened outside his room, but he ignored it from beginning to end. I even arranged Runyue to serve him. Who would have thought that he is also a coward? Uncle Jiao sighed softly. As an outsider, it's understandable that he doesn't dare to offend Hing family. Wanru's pretty face showed deep disappointment and disdain. My father also said that this person is not an ordinary person. He asked me to treat him well and not neglect him. He even said that when I encounter an irresolvable crisis, I can ask this person for help. Who would have thought that? He is such a coward and incompetent person. Uncle Jiao seemed to be lost in thought as he said, Master has experienced countless great dangers and great storms in his life. With his eyes that can see through the affairs of the world, it's extremely rare for him to misjudge someone. Since he said that, then he must have noticed something unusual about this young Master Shiryu. After a pause, he said in a gentle voice, In my opinion, miss, you can't act on impulse. After all, this matter is caused by those clansmen of Hing family, and it has nothing to do with child Shiryu. We can't say anything whether he helps or not. Yes, it has nothing to do with him. Wanru's voice was depressed. If I knew it, I shouldn't have asked Runyue to serve him, and I shouldn't have treated him differently from others. His voice was filled with disappointment. Originally, she had a good impression of Lin Sun in recent days, and she even had a good impression of him. But now, this little bit of good impression was gone. Miss, should I still serve child Shiryu? Runyue asked timidly. No need. Wanru said coldly without hesitation, From now on, just pretend that he doesn't exist on this treasure ship. Uncle Jiao sighed softly and said gently, Miss. As soon as he finished speaking, he was interrupted by Wanru. Uncle Jiao, if you want to persuade me to understand and approve of that selfish and timid guy, then don't say it. Uncle Jiao could only smile bitterly. In fact, he was also a little uncomfortable in his heart. It was an exception to agree to let Shiryu join them this time. After boarding the ship, Wanru sent her personal maid Runyue to serve him, and she treated him without any neglect from beginning to end. Even if he didn't appreciate it, how could he be indifferent and choose to stand by when it happened outside his room just now? If it were someone else, perhaps she would also feel disappointed. Chapter 27:11. In the room, Lin soon sat cross-legged and frowned slightly. Although the incident outside the door had come to an end, he still felt that something was amiss. Originally, when he saw Heng Xingwen slapping Runyue, he had already planned to help. After all, Runyue was a maid arranged to stay by his side. Moreover, he had to be grateful to Wanru for leading the way this time. But just as he was about to act, Lin soon realized that something was amiss. First of all, Heng Xinghai was at the 8th level of the Emperor Realm, while Runyue was only at the 6th level of the Emperor Realm. If he really wanted to capture Runyu and take her away, he could guarantee that he would be able to capture Runyu in an instant. Moreover, he wouldn't make a single sound. But Heng Xinghai didn't do so. He didn't even care that it would cause a commotion and let others know. This was undoubtedly a little strange. Moreover, the place where it happened was also very strange. From the moment he set foot on the treasure ship, Lin Sun had already warned Runyue that he didn't need any service when he cultivated in his room. It was best not to disturb him unless it was necessary. Now, the treasure ship had been flying for more than 10 days. Runyue was indeed very obedient and didn't disturb Lin Sun. But today, Runyu appeared outside his room, and was targeted by the horizontal star sea. Even if Runyue took the initiative to seek help after encountering danger, shouldn't she, as Wanru's maid, seek help from Wanru first? But she appeared in front of his room. Lin soon felt that the whole thing was deliberately shown to him. This was very unusual. Because of this, Lin Sun, who originally planned to act, forcibly resisted the urge to do so and chose to look on coldly. Right now, Lin Sun was pondering whether there was a problem with Heng Xingwen or Runyue, or perhaps there was a problem with both of them. It was obvious that they were doing this for him. However, what was their goal in doing this? Was he trying to test his own abilities? Or to find out more about him? Lin Sun pondered for a long time and then shook his head. No matter what tricks they had up their sleeves, if they really provoked him, he would just kill them. In Lin's eyes, only Uncle Jiao beside Wan Ro was worthy of his attention on the whole treasure ship. As for the others, it was hard for Lin Sun to pay attention to them. In these years, he had even killed undying beings. Why would he care about these emperor-level characters? Other people might be wary of the Heng family's might, but sorry to say, ever since Lin Sun entered the eternal true world, he had never been afraid of any immortal emperor. Never mind, this matter occurred on the treasured vessel after all, so it's better to warn Wanru. Lin Sun got up, walked out of the room and went straight to where Wanru lived. However, when Lin Sun knocked on the door, Ruanyue's ice-cold voice came from the room. "My young mistress is resting. Young master, please come back another day." Lin Sun was in a daze and said, "Please tell your miss that I have an important matter to discuss with her." After a short silence, Ruanyue's voice rang out again. "Young master, my young lady said that if there's anything, we'll talk about it another day." Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and vaguely figured out something. He couldn't help but smile and said, "Fine." He turned around and left. He already knew that the reason why Wanru refused to see him was probably because she blamed him for not stopping the disturbance before. Perhaps she thought he was timid and afraid of trouble? Or selfish and cold-blooded? Lin Sun smiled and didn't care about this little rejection. After all, it was a trivial matter. For the sake of old Kuan, he wouldn't argue with Wanru. On the way back to the room, Lin Sun saw a man in a golden robe waiting for him. He was strong and valiant. It was Heng Xinghai, who was crazy about sword cultivation. When he saw Lin Sun, he said, "My friend, can we have a chat? What do you want to talk about?" Lin Sun stopped. Heng Xinghai smiled and said, "Don't be nervous. I just heard that you boarded the ship with the help of Peng family. Peng Tianxiang and I are old friends, so I want to get to know you." "Really? But I'm not interested in getting to know someone I don't know." Lin Sun also smiled and walked straight forward. Heng Xinghai was stunned. It seemed that he didn't expect to be rejected like this. Watching Lin Sun's back, he couldn't help but show a touch of coldness. The next moment, he also turned around and left. There's really something wrong with the Heng family. Back in the room, Lin Sun remembered Heng Xinghai's invitation and keenly realized that the situation on the treasure ship was far from as simple as it seemed. In other words, these Heng family members obviously had other intentions. No matter what you want to do, if you dare to provoke me, don't blame me for being rude, Lin Sun's black eyes flashed. He sat down casually, got rid of distracting thoughts, and continued to meditate. In another room, Heng Xinghai's face was gloomy. He stared at Heng Xingwen like a sword and said, "Do you know that your actions today have attracted Shi Yu's attention?" Heng Xingwen spoke indifferently. "I just wanted to probe his ability, so as to avoid any mishaps from occurring when we take action. Who would have imagined that this fellow would be a cowardly tortoise? Even the maidservant by his side has been bullied, yet he still doesn't dare show himself. How cowardly!" As he said, he couldn't help laughing. Heng Xinghai snorted coldly. Thinking of the scene where he was refused by Lin Sun before, he felt a little uneasy and said, "Shi Yu is not as cowardly as you think. Before we take action, take some people to monitor him. If he dares to do anything, kill him immediately." Heng Xingwen said with a smile, "Don't worry. It's a piece of cake." Heng Xinghai's eyes were as sharp as swords. He said coldly, "A piece of cake? If you dare to make any mistakes and delay this action, someone will deal with you even if I don't do it." Heng Xingwen was stunned for a moment, and then his handsome face showed a solemn expression. A few days passed in a hurry, and there were no more twists and turns along the way. On this day, the treasure ship carrying Lin Sun and the others suddenly shook violently. From time to time there was the sound of wind, rain, and thunder. "Everyone, there's no need to panic. Our treasured vessel has already set out on the path to the ocean of anarchy. In the next few days, the treasured vessel will pass through various dangerous areas, but so long as everyone stays on the treasured vessel, then you'll be fine." On the ship, Uncle Jiao's hoarse voice sounded. "Are we already going to Chaos Demon Sea?" Lin Sun pushed the door open and walked out of the huge palace-like cabin. He came to the deck, which was comparable to a giant square. Wanru, Uncle Jiao, and a group of guards were already standing by the railing of the deck. Some clansmen of Heng family, such as Heng Xinghai and Heng Xingwen, were also there. When Lin Sun appeared, Heng Xinghai and others just glanced at him, and then looked away to the distance. "Child Shi Yu is also here." Uncle Jiao greeted him with a smile. Wanru stood there without looking back. Obviously, she didn't want to pay attention to Lin Sun. Lin Sun smiled and said, "It's the first time for me to go to Chaos Demon Sea. I heard the noise, so I came to have a look." He looked into the distance. At this moment, the treasured vessel was sailing within an expanse of a pitch-black sea of clouds. Occasionally, bolts of lightning that were thick like pythons would charge out from within the black sea of clouds, and they emitted dazzling and resplendent lights while rumbling shook the soul. Storms like whirlpools, like a group of demons dancing wildly, rolled and whistled in the sea of clouds, tore the sky, disturbed the universe, and made rumbling sounds. In contrast, the treasure ship carrying them was like a drop in the sea, extremely small. "This is the Black Demon Thunder Sea, where the evil and vicious 10,000 demons' thunder is born. If struck by it, ordinary people in the Emperor realm can't bear it. And the chaotic Yin Gang wind is also extremely ferocious and can blow away people's souls. It's extremely strange." Uncle Jiao pointed to the distance and explained to Lin Sun. Lin Sun nodded and said, "It looks very dangerous indeed." He noticed that the treasured vessel was emanating layer after layer of rippling radiance that seemed like 7 colors, and it transformed into a barrier of light that enveloped the surroundings. Thus, it was able to safely avoid the numerous attacks of the myriad fiend divine lightning and chaotic gale on the way. For people like us who enter and exit the Chaos Demon Sea all year round, these things in front of us are just small tricks. The closer we get to the Chaos Demon Sea, the more dangerous it will be. For example, the Blood Demon Mountain has accumulated the bloody aura that has gathered on it since ancient times. This mountain is 90,000 meters high and stretches across the heavens and the earth. It's no different from a bloody purgatory. For example, there are countless narrow and long spatial rifts distributed in the Chaos Demon Sea. Walking in it, one will be swept by the spatial turbulence at all times. There are also the Ghost Underworld River, Sheep Horn Ridge, Eight Evils Island. Uncle Jiao spoke with confidence and composure, and he was very familiar with the dangerous places along the way. Lin Sun listened with relish and said, "No wonder the Chaos Demon Sea is regarded as the most chaotic place in the sixth heaven. Just the dangers along the way can prevent most cultivators from going there." Uncle Jiao smiled and said, "Therefore, the Chaos Demon Sea has become a refuge for those vicious and evil people. Ordinary people would never come to such a damned place unless they can't live anymore." Uncle Jiao. "Not far away," Wan Rou said. "We will arrive at the Blood Demon Mountain in half an hour. Prepare the goods in advance." Uncle Jiao nodded immediately, turned around, and left in a hurry. At this time, Heng Xinghai walked towards Wan Rou from afar with a straightforward expression, and he said with a smile, "Miss Wan Rou, can I ask you a question?" "I don't dare to ask." "May I know what child wants to ask?" Wan Rou said. Not far away, Heng Xingwen and some guards walked towards Lin Sun. They seemed to be casually looking at the scene outside the treasure ship. But Lin Sun frowned, because if he observed carefully, the figures of Heng Xingwen and others just happened to form a barrier between him and Wan Rou. Looking at Wan Rou, who was close at hand, Heng Xinghai still smiled, but his eyes suddenly became sharp and terrifying, and he said in a low voice, "I want to ask if the congenital bone left by ancestor Kuan is in Mrs. possession?" Chapter 27:12. Wan Rou's heart skipped a beat and her expression changed. Before she could react, a cold light flashed and pressed against Wan Rou's throat. This was a flying sword with a peerlessly sharp and brilliant glow, and it emitted a fierce aura that caused Wan Rou's delicate body to stiffen as a layer of goosebumps suffused the snow-white skin on her neck. Heng Xinghai smiled and said, "Now you can answer my question. Young miss, how dare you?" A wave of restlessness and exclamations arose in the surroundings. The guards of the Nine Leaves merchant group revealed shocked and furious expressions. No one had expected that horizontal star ocean would suddenly attack Wan Rou, and they were caught off guard by this scene. It wasn't just them. Even Wan Rou herself didn't expect something like this to happen. Her clear eyes turned extremely cold. "So you didn't come here to enter the Anarchy Sea. You have other plans," Wan Rou said angrily. Heng Xinghai smiled. "It's not too late. Young Miss Wan Rou, our goal this time is very simple. We want to take away Ancestor Kuan's connate natal bone. As long as you cooperate obediently, I promise I won't harm a single hair on your body." Wan Rou's heart was in turmoil. "What natal bone? I don't know anything about it. Why are you still playing dumb at a time like this?" Heng Xinghai's eyes were filled with mockery. "Run you, remind your young miss. Let her think about whether she remembers this item or not." "Run you?" Wan Rou's expression changed drastically. The usually obedient and quick-witted Run Yu pursed her lips into a smile and said, "Miss, you're truly forgetful. Didn't you head to the Chaos Demon Sea with that treasure to make a deal with Tao Lord Scarlet Fiend?" Wan Rou's heart sank and her limbs went cold. She actually calmed down now, but her eyes were filled with disappointment. She said, "Run Yu, I kept you by my side a long time ago and treated you like a sister. How dare you treat me like this? When did you betray me?" Run Yu's eyes were filled with pity. "What betrayal? I've always been a member of the Heng family and have been working for them all these years. It's just that you didn't know." Wan Rou was stunned. She looked at Heng Xinghai and said, "So you've been planning this for many years. Horizontal star C shook his head. I don't have that much patience. It's all my uncle's doing. Uncle? Wan Ro immediately thought of Heng Tian Shao, who had visited her in the middle of the night before they departed. So it was him. Wan Ro finally understood. No wonder Tian Heng and Tian Shao had rushed over and insisted on bringing Heng Xinghai and the others into this operation. They must have received the news in advance and knew the purpose of his trip, which was why they launched this operation. However, there was still a question in Wan Ro's heart. In the Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce, only she and her father knew about her trip with the Kuan ancestors' origin bone. But now, not only did Runway know about it, he even knew about traversing Star Ocean. Who was the one who leaked it? For a moment, Wan Ro's mind was in a mess. They'd just stepped onto the path to the Anarchy Devil Sea, yet such an unforeseen event had occurred. When she thought that it was extremely likely that this trip would come to a premature end, and when she recalled her father's ardent expectations, Wan Ro couldn't help but feel sorrow in her heart. How could this be? Miss Wan Ro, are you going to hand over that treasure of your own accord, or do you want me to do it for you? Horizontal Star C asked with a smile, and he had a confident attitude. The nearby guards of the Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce dared not act rashly for fear of harming the innocent. Quickly, go look for Uncle Jiao. One of the guards cried out anxiously. With this reminder, Wan Ro's eyes lit up. Right, there's still Uncle Jiao. Even if I die, I can still entrust this matter to Uncle Jiao. However, right at this moment, Horizontal Star C roared with laughter. I'm afraid the Uncle Jiao all of you speak of has already been captured. What? The hearts of Wan Ro and the guards of the Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce shook. After that, within their field of vision, they saw a thin and tall figure walk out from the cabin. He wore a violet robe and was filled with a dignified aura. Surprisingly, it was Heng Tianshao. Moreover, he held a bloody figure in his hand. If one looked carefully, they would notice to their surprise that it was Uncle Jiao. However, Uncle Jiao had suffered a heavy injury and was unconscious. When she saw this scene, Wan Ro simply felt as if she was struck by lightning. She was completely stunned and dazed. How could this be? Niece, I'm sorry for the offense. Heng Tianshao walked forward and laughed heartily. Just like Starcy said, as long as you hand over that treasure, I'll definitely spare your life. As an immortal emperor clan, how noble is your Heng clan? Why would you do such a thing? Wan Ro's pretty face was ghastly pale, and her body was trembling slightly. Humans die for wealth, and birds die for food. Even my Heng clan is tempted by the origin bone left behind by the Kuan ancestor. Heng Tianshao sighed emotionally. In the next moment, his expression turned serious as he stared at Wan Ro and said, Time is precious. Niece, if you still don't hand over that treasure, then I'll have no choice but to kill you first before taking the treasure from you. The atmosphere instantly became tense and oppressive. Everyone looked at Wan Ro in unison. The guards of the Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce were filled with grief and indignation. On the other hand, Heng Xinghai, Heng Xingwen, and the other members of the Heng clan sneered. Right at this moment, if you were willing to meet me a few days ago, perhaps today's incident wouldn't have happened. A soft sigh sounded abruptly. However, it's not too late now. Everyone was stunned. Looking in the direction of the voice, they saw the tall figure of Lin Sun, who was dressed in a moon-white robe. Wan Ro was also stunned. She didn't expect that in such a situation, Lin Sun, who she had always regarded as a cold-blooded and cowardly coward, would take the initiative to intervene. The members of the Heng clan were also very surprised. Even a fool could see that the current situation was completely under their control. But now, there was someone who was not afraid of death. Xingwen, kill him! Heng Xinghai frowned and shouted. Heng Xingwen, who had been standing between Lin Sun and Wan Ro in the distance like a barrier, revealed a grim smile and suddenly waved his hand. Immediately, The 3 Ancestor Realm elders near him rushed towards Lin Sun, each of them releasing the terrifying power of the Ancestor Realm. Wanro's heart suddenly tightened. She couldn't bear to watch anymore. But an incredible scene appeared. Lin Sun stood still and raised his hand to press in the void. Bang! 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 Amidst 3 muffled sounds, the 3 Emperor Ancestors, who possessed terrifying presences that could make any Emperor Realm expert feel fear and despair, were like flies as they slammed onto the deck. Their cultivation and presences had been sealed at the same time. This sudden scene caused everyone in the surroundings to be shocked, and it was perfectly silent. Heng Xingwen's eyeballs almost fell out, and the grim smile on his face froze. The members of the Heng clan also looked as if they had seen a ghost. Their bodies were stiff and they couldn't believe it. Heng Tianxiao and Heng Xinghai's hearts trembled, and their faces changed dramatically. They realized that the situation was not good. The atmosphere also became deathly silent. The existence of the Ancestor Realm had already stood at the peak of the Emperor Realm. Even the peak 8th level Emperor could only bow in front of this realm. Characters at this level, even in the 6th heaven, could be regarded as the top. It was true that these 3 people were all elders of the Heng clan, but their cultivation was at the Ancestor Realm. But now, the 3 Emperor Ancestors were suppressed as soon as they made a move. Who would have thought of this before? Wanro was also shocked. Her eyes widened, and her heart pounded violently. She remembered what her father, Old Kuan, said and vaguely understood, but the contrast was so great that she couldn't believe it for a while. The guards of the 9 Leaves Chamber of Commerce were also stunned at this moment. Of course, they knew this child Shiryu, but they didn't know that he was a hidden master. If you work for others, you must be prepared to die. Since you attacked me, I can't let you live. Lin Sun's indifferent voice sounded in the field, and he pressed his palm in the void and clenched his fist. The bodies of the 3 Ancestor Realm powerhouses who were suppressed on the ground exploded one by one, and their primordial spirits turned into powder. Scarlet blood burst out. Many people were so shocked that they trembled all over, and their faces changed in horror. How dare you kill the people of my Heng clan? Heng Xingwen screamed, stimulated by this bloody scene. Lin Sun flicked his finger. A sword chi appeared out of thin air and flashed gently. Puff! Blood splashed. Heng Xingwen, a peak 8th level Emperor Realm powerhouse, was harvested like grass. Why wouldn't I dare? Lin Sun spoke indifferently. Everyone from the Heng clan felt a chill in their hearts when they saw this scene, and they were terrified and uneasy. It was too terrifying. In just the blink of an eye, he killed 3 Emperor Ancestors and a peak 8th level Emperor, and he did it so casually as if he was crushing an ant. How could they not be terrified? Friend, my Heng clan has offended you in the past. Can you give my Heng clan some face and let this matter end here? Heng Tianxiao took a deep breath and spoke in a low voice. Your Heng clan doesn't have enough face. Lin Sun smiled, and his eyes were filled with disdain. As he spoke, he suddenly pressed his fingers together and drew a line. Swoosh! Heng Tianxiao wanted to teleport and dodge at the first possible moment, but he was still halfway when the space he was in was torn apart by a dazzling and sharp sword chi. Heng Tianxiao's body was torn apart along with the sword chi, and he was directly slashed into 2. The horrifying scene of his death caused a wave of terrified screams to resound in the field, and the clansmen of the Heng clan panicked and fled. Swish! Lin Sun flicked his sleeve, and strands of sword chi surged into appearance and shot out explosively in the sky. Every single slash of sword chi would definitely take a life. No matter what secret technique or treasure they utilized, they were completely vulnerable before the slaughter of the sword chi, and they were easily annihilated. In the blink of an eye, the deck was dyed red with blood. Besides Heng Xinghai and Runyu, all the other members of the Heng clan were killed on the spot. He was simply like a whirlwind that slaughtered everyone, and he was extremely overbearing. So what if they were Emperor Ancestors? They were slaughtered like chickens and dogs. The most terrifying thing was from the beginning until the end, Lin Sun's movements were casual and carefree, and he even stood on the spot without moving a single step. When looked at from afar, he was like a supreme overlord that was annihilated in the blink of an eye. Chapter 27:13. The pungent smell of blood permeated the deck, and the atmosphere was deathly silent. The guards of the Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce were shocked, and their scalps were numb. The bloody scene of slaughter was completely beyond their imagination. Beside them, Ruinue's pretty face was pale and full of horror. Her teeth were chattering, and her mind was in a trance. She didn't dare to escape because those who chose to escape had already died. "If you dare to make another move, I'll kill her," Horizontal Xinghai roared in a hoarse voice, and his face was livid and ferocious. The death of Heng Tianxiao, Heng Xingwen, and the others brought him endless horror, which stimulated him to firmly clamp down on Wanru at the first possible moment, and the sharp flying sword was pressed against Wanru's snow-white throat. "Really? You can have a try." As he spoke, Lin Sun walked over unhurriedly. "Don't come over." Horizontal Xinghai's pupils dilated, full of panic and fear. Wanru also widened her eyes. Didn't he care about her life at all? Originally, she was quite ashamed because she realized that she might have misunderstood Lin Sun, and she felt very apologetic. But now she couldn't understand it. Did this guy want to help her, or did he just want those clansmen of the Heng family? Didn't he care about her life at all? For a moment, her expression was uncertain, and her heart was miserable and sorrowful. Seeing Lin Sun approaching, Horizontal Xinghai, who had been forced to the point that his eyes were bloodshot, couldn't help roaring, "You forced me to do this." With a thought in his mind, the flying sword at Wanru's throat buzzed. At this moment, a terrible restrictive force firmly held the flying sword. No matter how Horizontal Xinghai exerted his strength, it wouldn't move at all. The flying sword that was connected with his mind seemed to be imprisoned. Horizontal Xinghai's body was cold, and his soul almost left his body. Realizing that the situation was not good, he suddenly raised his hand and was about to smash Wanru's head. However, a finger force was faster than him, and it suddenly penetrated the space between his eyebrows, creating a bloody hole. As the finger force spread, his spirit and vitality were crushed into powder. Puff! Blood sprayed out as Horizontal Star C's eyes opened wide, and then he silently fell to the ground with his head raised. At the instant his body fell to the ground, it swiftly transformed into a handful of ash that dispersed into the surroundings. With a clang, the flying sword at Wanru's throat lost control and fell to the ground, making a crisp sound of impact. Wanru's entire body shuddered. The helplessness, sorrow, misery, and despair in her heart were released at this moment, and she felt as if she had been freed. She stared blankly at Lin Sun, who had come to her, with a complicated look in her eyes. Her emotions were surging, and she didn't know what to say. "I'll leave her to you." Lin Sun knew at a glance that Wanru was too frightened. Without saying anything more, he turned around and came to Uncle Jiao, who was in a coma, frowning slightly. Previously, even he did not expect that an expert like Uncle Jiao would be suppressed by Heng Tianxiao in the cabin. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun woke Uncle Jiao up from his coma and handed him a bottle of medicinal pellets. "Take good care of yourself." "Thank you, young master." Uncle Jiao was stunned at first, but he immediately understood when he looked around, and he couldn't help but express his gratitude. "There's no need to thank me. You helped me lead the way to the Chaos Demon Sea, and I helped you resolve the calamity. It's my duty." As he spoke, Lin Sun turned around and walked into the cabin. Uncle Jiao's expression was full of emotion and complicated as he watched Lin Sun's figure disappear. "Young miss, for the sake of our friendship over the years, please don't kill me." Runwe knelt on the deck with a thump and begged with a trembling voice. Wanru's expression became extremely cold, and she said, "Even now, I still don't understand how you found out about the Kuan ancestor's life bone. Young miss, I swear to the heavens that I absolutely didn't leak this information. Runwa cried out in panic, because I didn't know it at all before. I only knew that young miss was going to do something important on this trip, so I revealed it to the Hung clan in advance. As for the Koan ancestor's life bone, I don't even know what treasure it is. Wanro frowned. So, it was discovered by the Hung clan themselves? Even now, you still don't know how to repent. I can't let you live. Uncle Jiao walked forward and slapped down. Bang! In the roar of the divine light, Runwa died and her soul scattered. Wanro was stunned. She still had some questions to ask, but she could only give up now. Young miss, are you all right? Uncle Jiao asked worriedly. I'm fine. But you, Uncle Jiao, you'd better go to recuperate and leave the rest to me. Wanro exhorted. Young miss, don't forget to apologize and thank Child Shiryu. If he didn't help us this time, we would really be finished, Uncle Jiao said. Okay. Wanro nodded. Walking into the cabin, Lin Sun paused and thought for a moment. Then, he spread out his spiritual awareness. After a while, he frowned. There was no trace of a fight left in the cabin. But Uncle Jiao's injuries were quite serious and bloody, which was obviously caused by a fierce fight. With the power of Hing Tianxiao, if he didn't use some terrible secret treasure, I'm afraid he couldn't suppress Uncle Jiao in such a short time. Lin Sun was a little confused. A trace of doubt arose in Lin Sun's heart. In his view, it was only a moment since Uncle Jiao left the deck and returned to the cabin. But in such a short time, Heng Tianxiao silently suppressed Uncle Jiao. The most incredible thing was that Lin Sun didn't notice any movement even with his powerful spiritual awareness. This was a little strange. After a moment of silence, Lin Sun shook his head and walked to his room. The treasure ship stopped and didn't move forward. Wanro needed time to sort out all kinds of things after the bloody battle. Lin Sun didn't care about this. He returned to his room and began to cultivate. Recently, he had perfected and refined the parts of the Great Way Furnace scripture related to the ancestor realm. Up to now, this scripture could be called a complete emperor's scripture. The Tao and Dharma contained in it were all obtained by Lin Sun's cultivation over the years. It was different from the world, and could be called the only one in the world. When Lin Sun really perfected this scripture, he also had an indescribable sense of achievement in his heart. It was as if he had established the root of his own Tao, so that his Tao had the power to last forever. It was also at this time that Lin Sun realized that he had really reached the peak of Emperor Tao. He could look down on the past and the present and be unrivaled in the world. Fortunately, although I can't break through to the immortal realm, I still have the primordial Tao tree and the chaos tree. The mysteries emerging from them are enough to help me understand more mysteries of the Tao. Lin Sun thought. The primordial Tao tree was a unique treasure of the last era. It included the complete mysteries of the Tao of immortals. Combined with the origin of Tao, it could often bring Lin Sun unexpected inspiration and gains. The Chaos Tree was nurtured by the 4 divine trees and various divine materials collected for many years on the Starry Sky ancient path. It had taken root in Lin Sun's life realm a long time ago. In these past few years, the tree had grown up, and it had grown many strong branches that were like blade. Numerous completely round and translucent green leaves grew on the branches, and the profound and unfathomable veins on the leaves surged with the profundities of the laws of chaos. Lin Sun was able to clearly sense that the aura emitted by the chaotic tree during these years when he was meditating and comprehending the great Tao had provided him with great help, and it allowed the great Tao laws he condensed to be pure and strong, and it revealed a primitive aura of chaos. It could be said that the power produced by the chaos tree was like a furnace, helping Lin Sun to temper the purest and most primitive Tao law. And this was also an important reason why Lin Sun could stand above his peers and be called invincible at the peak. Unfortunately, there are too few books about the immortal Tao in this world. Even among the immortal emperor clans, There are very few who have the real, immortal scripture Lin Sun sighed in his heart. The eternal path towards the Tao was like a supreme grand Tao, and practically all existences that had attained this realm had relied on their own wisdom and willpower to seek it, because there was almost no immortal inheritance in this world. Moreover, even if it was an immortal inheritance, without the cultivation of the immortal realm, it was impossible to learn from it. Lin soon heard that in the immortal emperor clans, those who reached the immortal realm couldn't pass down the mysteries of the immortal Tao in scriptures. This was because everyone's immortal Tao was different. Even if it was a scripture, it wasn't suitable for others to comprehend. Naturally, it couldn't be passed down. For the immortal emperor clans, the only benefit was that when their clansmen tried to reach the immortal realm, they could get some pointers from the immortal realm. The experience and knowledge they gained on the immortal Tao was undoubtedly the most valuable. Unfortunately, Lin Sun, who was all alone, was destined to not get any pointers even if he tried to reach the immortal realm. I heard that the Yuan sect, Spirit sect, Shaman sect, and Zen sect each have some scriptures that belong to the immortal realm. I wonder if it's true, Lin Sun pondered. The 4 great ancestral halls represented the 4 transcendent super forces in the eternal true world. Even if they didn't appear for many years, no one dared to underestimate their existence. Such a transcendent force caused the 10 immortal giants of the 8th heaven to be wary and courteous. One could imagine how terrifying their foundation was, and how could such a force not have immortal Tao scriptures and scriptures? Young master, I'm Wan Ro. Sorry to disturb you, I've come to see you. Suddenly, Wan Ro's voice sounded outside the room. However, it was different from before. The voice was soft and gentle, and it carried respect from the bottom of her heart. Lin Sun woke up from his thoughts and immediately got up. He opened the door and looked at Wan Ro, who was standing outside. He couldn't help but smile. Miss Wan Ro, I don't dare to refuse you. Please come in. Wan Ro's fair and delicate oval face was embarrassed. Not long ago, because of that misunderstanding, she had refused Lin Sun. Fortunately, Lin Sun didn't argue with her this time. In the room, Lin Sun invited Wan Ro to take a seat. He sat opposite her and said, "If you came to thank me, then you don't have to. Even if I didn't help you, those Hing family members wouldn't have been able to leave the treasure ship alive." Wan Ro was stunned. "Young master, do you have enmity with the Hing family?" Lin Sun smiled. "In fact, my enemies are all over the world. The Hing family is just one of them." "Really?" Wan Ro pursed her lips and smiled. Obviously, she thought Lin Sun was joking. The two chatted for a while, and Wan Ro couldn't help but ask, "Young master, aren't you curious why the Hing family did this?" Lin Sun smiled. "Didn't Hing Tianxiao say that humans die in pursuit of wealth and birds die in pursuit of food? Also, don't worry. Although I'm interested in the Kuan ancestors' life bone, I won't do something like killing people and taking their treasures." How could he not hear the probing in Wan Ro's words? Chapter 27:14. Wan Ro lowered her clear eyes. "Young master, I'm not testing you on purpose. It's just that." She hesitated for a while, then suddenly raised her head and stared at Lin Sun, saying, "I have a request. If you agree, I can give you the Kuan ancestors' bone as a token of appreciation." Lin Sun was a little surprised. "What is it?" Wan Ro sighed softly. "There's no need for me to hide it now." Then, he told them everything that had happened. It turned out that a few years ago, Old Kuan was ambushed by Tao Lord Scarlet Fiend of Scarlet Copper Mountain when he was trading goods in the Chaos Demon Sea. Not only did Old Kuan's belongings were stolen, his son, Bowen, was even taken away. Tao Lord Scarlet Fiend received the news from somewhere and threatened to kill Old Kuan's son if he did not deliver the life bone of the Kuan ancestor to him within 10 years. Ever since Old Kuan returned from the Chaos Demon Sea, he had been worrying about this matter. Eventually, he decided to exchange the life bone of the Kuan ancestor for his son's life. However, Old Kuan was severely injured and his Tao foundation was severely damaged. There was no way he could cross the Chaos Demon Sea anymore, so he entrusted this important task to Wan. That was how the operation to the Chaos Demon Sea came about. After understanding that, Lin Sun finally understood. You want me to save your brother, Bowen, from the hands of Tao Lord Scarlet Fiend? Wan Ro nodded. Although the threat from the Hing family has been resolved, I'm worried that if Tao Lord Scarlet Fiend goes back on his word when we reach Scarlet Copper Mountain and exchange the hostages, the consequences will be dire. Lin Sun asked, Didn't your father give you any guidance? Wan Ro replied, Father handed a trump card to Uncle Jiao that's enough to prevent Tao Lord Scarlet Fiend from acting rashly. However, I'm still worried. After all, my brother's life is in the hands of that fiend. Any slight mistake might harm my brother's life. That's something I don't want to see. Lin Sun asked in a low voice, What does Uncle Jiao mean by that? At the mention of Uncle Jiao, Wan Ro could not help but smile bitterly. Uncle Jiao is already severely injured and won't be of much help. Left with no choice, I can only seek help from you, young master. Lin Sun said, You also know that the purpose of my going to Chaos Demon Sea is to find a person, but I know nothing about the situation in Chaos Demon Sea. Before he could finish speaking, Wan Ro swiftly said, I can help young master with this matter. During these years, my father and I have frequently traveled to the Chaotic Demon Sea, and we have some understanding of the situation there. Moreover, my father frequently conducts transactions with the various great powers in the Chaotic Demon Sea, and he knows some acquaintances. When the time comes, I will ask them to help as well. Lin Sun smiled and said, Thank you in advance. After a pause, he asked, Can you tell me more about this Tao Lord Crimson Fiend? This was called returning a plum for a peach. Wanru felt a wave of excitement in her heart. She already knew that Lin Sun had already agreed to her request, and this caused her to be overjoyed. She immediately told Lin Sun everything she knew about Tao Lord Scarlet Fiend. Tao Lord Crimson Fiend, a great devil that occupied the Crimson Copper Mountain in the Chaotic Devil Sea. He had over 1,000 subordinates under him, and all of them were notorious bandits and thugs. Tao Lord Scarlet Fiend himself was an old fellow who had stepped into the Ancestor realm countless years ago. He was cunning and ruthless, cold and bloodthirsty, and his combat strength was extremely domineering. In the Chaotic Demon Sea, Tao Lord Scarlet Fiend was rather famous and could be considered an overlord. It was rumored that a long time ago, Tao Lord Scarlet Fiend had once escaped from the pursuit of an eternal being and survived. From this, it could be seen how extraordinary this old devil was. In reality, according to Wan Ro, although there were countless factions of various sizes in the Chaotic Demon Sea, those small factions would easily be annihilated and vanish into thin air. The reason was that the Chaotic Demon Sea was extremely turbulent and had no order or rules to speak of. Bloody massacres occurred almost every day. Only those top and ferocious major factions could occupy the Chaotic Demon Sea all year round, unafraid of the turbulence and the impact of blood. The Crimson Copper Mountain that Tao Lord Scarlet Fiend resided in could not be considered a top faction in the Chaotic Demon Sea, but it was not something that ordinary small factions could compare to either. After understanding all of this, Lin Sun's heart was completely unperturbed. There wasn't even a single eternal being, so how could he possibly take them seriously? However, Lin Sun's calm demeanor made Wan Ro feel uneasy. She could not help but ask, Young master, do you feel troubled? Lin Sun could not help but chuckle. Don't worry, I'll accompany you when the time comes. After resting for 2 days, the treasure ship continued its journey. Before long, they arrived at Blood Fiend Mountain. This mountain was 90,000 feet tall and spanned across the heavens and earth. Countless waterfall-like rivers of blood poured down from the peak of the mountain, emanating a thick stench of blood. Blood Fiend Mountain was the first checkpoint in the Chaotic Demon Sea, and it was controlled by the 7 major factions in the Chaotic Demon Sea in turns. After the treasure ship arrived, Uncle Jiao appeared and communicated with the factions that occupied Blood Fiend Mountain. After paying a considerable toll, they were allowed to pass smoothly. Lin soon observed everything along the way and did not comment. Given his abilities, he could easily kill his way through Blood Fiend Mountain. However, if he did that, it would definitely cause unnecessary trouble. On the contrary, following the treasure ship of the Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce would not cause any trouble. However, it was obvious that the toll had to be paid. On the following journey, the treasure ship successively passed Ghost Underworld River, Sheep Horn Ridge, Eight Evils Island. Every place could be called a great ominous place. Not only were there all kinds of factions, but every place was extremely dangerous and distributed with many natural disasters. For example, the Ghost Underworld River had stormy waves all year round. There were countless dangers hidden in the river. If one tried to break through it forcefully, there would definitely be danger at every step. Fortunately, with the signboard of the Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce, Lin Sun and the others did not encounter any difficulties along the way. They smoothly passed through one dangerous checkpoint after another. Of course, they also paid the toll again and again. In this regard, Wan Rou had calculated for Lin Sun. Every time they entered and left Chaotic Demon Sea, the toll paid, if converted into Eternal Void Source crystals, was equivalent to about 300 million. However, as long as the transaction went smoothly, the Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce would earn more than 3 times the amount of the toll every time. The reason was that the Chaotic Demon Sea was extremely lacking in resources. That place was ferocious, chaotic, turbulent, and bloody. The few cultivation resources were unable to satisfy the needs of those experts. As a result, some cultivation resources that were commonly seen in the outside world could often be sold for 10 or even 100 times the price in the Chaotic Demon Sea. It could be said to be extremely profitable. Of course, the Chaotic Demon Sea was also rich in some cultivation resources that could not be found in the outside world. For example, some rare divine materials and divine materials. After these cultivation resources were purchased by the Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce, they could be sold for 10 or even 100 times the price in the outside world. After understanding all this, Lin Sun could not help but be shocked. This kind of buying and selling was completely profiting from both sides, and it was extremely profitable. Of course, the more profitable the purchase, the greater the risk. Even a faction like the Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce that entered and left Chaotic Demon Sea all year round would take great risks every time they conducted a transaction. For example, a few years ago, Old Kuan was ambushed by Dao Lord Crimson Fiend and almost lost his life. Even though he was lucky enough to escape, his son was captured and became a hostage. If the Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce was in such a state, there was no need to mention others. My Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce is far inferior to those Immortal Emperor clans. The reason why we can enter and leave Chaotic Demon Sea all year round is because of my father. Without him, the Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce would have ceased to exist a long time ago. Occasionally, Wan Rou would sigh with sorrow and worry. Because Old Kuan had suffered a heavy injury and no one knew when he would recover. Moreover, he had offended the Hun clan. It could be said that the Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce was in a precarious situation. Lin Sun could not say much about this. Half a month later, the treasured ship finally arrived at the Chaotic Demon Sea. As far as the eye could see, it was a boundless black sea. The sky above the sea was also dark. There were no stars, sun, or moon, and it was oppressive. The spatial order of the Chaotic Demon Sea is incomparably chaotic. The east, south, west, north, every direction here can change at any time. It is precisely because of this that the Chaotic Demon Sea is like a natural maze world. Those who are unfamiliar with the situation here are destined to get lost within. On the deck of the treasured ship, Wan Rou spoke softly. Indeed. Lin Sun looked around for a moment and realized that the spatial power in this world was extremely chaotic. It was like chaos. His previous experience in determining the direction did not work here. How do you determine the direction? Lin Sun asked. Magnetic compass. As she spoke, Wan Ro took out a palm-sized compass polished from a black stone. There was a slender pointer floating in the air. This is made from a type of divine material unique to the Chaos Demon Sea, the divine magnetic iron. It can't be found in the outside world. A magnetic compass like this is worth 100 million eternal void source crystals, and it's usually hard to buy. Wan Ro said and handed the magnetic compass to Lin Sun. Child, please accept this little thing. It's a token of my appreciation. What about you? Lin Sun asked. Of course I have more. Wan Ro smiled. Lin Sun also smiled. He didn't refuse and accepted it. When speaking of the Origin Magnetic Compass, we have to mention the Origin Magnetic Divine Mountain. Supposedly, there are 3 great restricted areas in the Ocean of Anarchy. One of them is the Origin Magnetic Wind Belt where the Origin Magnetic Divine Mountain reside. In the countless years of the past, countless cultivators have yearned to head to the Origin Magnetic Divine Mountain and refine the energy of magnetism for their own use. But without exception, practically all of them suffered misfortune. Wan Ro said, the reason is that the magnetic wind belt is filled with a strange spatial order. It's said that even immortals will be torn apart by the storm formed by the spatial order. Every once in a while, a tide of energy will erupt in the Origin magnetic wind belt. At that time, some Origin magnetic divine iron will be washed out and flow into the outside world. After being collected, it can be refined into Origin magnetic compasses. P.S. Important notice. Goldfish will try its best to post 10 chapters tomorrow. Around noon tomorrow, it will post 4 chapters in a row. For those who have a monthly ticket, don't forget to vote tomorrow. Chapter 27:15. The Origin Magnetic Wind Belt. One of the 3 great restricted areas of the Ocean of Anarchy. Lin Sun was stunned, and he was thinking about the space order energy that filled the Origin Magnetic Wind Belt. Since it could kill existences at the immortal realm, then perhaps only the heavenly order energy could accomplish it. The treasured ship flew on the black surface of the sea. All along the way, storms raged and lightning flashed, and the depths of the ink-black seawater was suffused with numerous dangerous auras. Occasionally, they would pass by some scattered islands that were like chess pieces, and many ferocious and ruthless auras charged out from those islands. But when they saw the totem symbol of the 9 Leaves merchant group that hung on the treasured ship, these ferocious auras were restrained, and the treasured ship flew safely. Such a situation occurred at all times along the way, and Lin Sun couldn't help but feel apprehensive. If it was an ordinary cultivator, then even if they were alive to arrive at the Ocean of Anarchy, they would absolutely be unable to escape the ambushes along the way. Similarly, if it was him acting alone without the name of the 9 Leaves merchant group, then he was bound to experience countless battles and slaughters all along the way. 2 days later, the treasured ship was anchored on an enormous island that floated on the sea. It was called an island, but it was comparable to an enormous city. There were buildings in great numbers on the island, and the streets were disorderly. Thousand Blessings Island. An island where killing and fighting were prohibited. No matter who it was, anyone could buy or sell here, and it was one of the few pure lands in the Ocean of Anarchy. The so-called pure lands meant that one didn't have to worry about encountering danger. However, anyone who stepped foot on the island must leave within 3 days. Otherwise, once they were reported, they would suffer the expulsion of all the cultivators on the island. This was an iron law that was jointly established by numerous powers of the Ocean of Anarchy. After the treasured ship of the 9 Leaves merchant group entered the island, Uncle Jiao left hastily by himself. He was going to inquire about information related to Scarlet Copper Mountain in order to prepare to rescue Old Kuan's son. Bo and Wan Ro brought Lin Sun with her, and they were accompanied by a group of guards to a merchant called the 6 Shade House. Wan Ro brought a large amount of cultivation resources with her for this trip, and she was going to trade here. At the same time, she was going to purchase some divine materials and materials that were unique to the ocean of anarchy. All along the way, Lin Sun was like a spectator, and he sized up everything he saw along the way. Unlike the outside world, all the cultivators here emanated a ferocious and bloody aura, and it was extremely conspicuous. According to Lin Sun's understanding, the chaotic demon sea was known as the land of sin. Those that resided here were practically all evil spirits that were not tolerated by the outside world. Of course, there was no lack of vicious people. This was like the world of darkness in the starry sky ancient path, but different. Because the dark world at least had some rules and orders set by the Bronze Sparrow Tower, the Hidden Land Realm, and the Divine Sunshine Ancient Sect. In the chaotic demon sea, it was completely chaotic and turbulent. Only a place like Thousand Blessings Island was relatively safer, but it wasn't absolute. There was no lack of desperados in this world. Not long after, the group arrived at the 6-een Temple. This was a trading company controlled by the 6-een Demon Mountain. And the 6-een Devil Mountain was one of the 7 top devil sects in the chaotic Devil Sea. After 2 hours of making all sorts of transactions, Wanru suggested that she hoped the 6 Shade House could help her investigate a person. The person who received Wanru was an in charge of the 6 Shade House, and he agreed readily. Immediately, Wanru took out a portrait that she had obtained from Lin Sun and handed it to him. The person in the portrait was Lu Boya. The in charge of the 6 Shade House sized him up and said, "Although I don't recognize this person, I can help you investigate him. It'll just take some time." Wanru said, "I'll have to trouble you with this matter, uncle. I'll leave in a month's time, but I'll come back before I leave." After settling this matter, Wanru left the 6 Shade House with Lin Sun and strolled around other places on Thousand Blessings Island for a while before returning to the treasure ship. Next, they would head to Red Copper Mountain. If the matter could be resolved smoothly, they would continue heading into the depths of the chaotic demon sea to make some transactions with other forces. However, what Lin Sun and the others did not expect was that Uncle Jiao, who had gone to investigate the Red Copper Mountains, Tao Lord Crimson Fiend, had yet to return. Uncle Jiao only returned hurriedly when Wanru could no longer sit still. "How did it go?" Wanru asked right away. Uncle Jiao revealed a smile. "Tao Lord Crimson Fiend hasn't left Red Copper Mountain recently. We'll definitely be able to meet him if we head there now. Furthermore, I've already contacted someone from Red Copper Mountain. I believe Tao Lord Crimson Fiend will know about it soon. We'll head there, and we'll be able to rescue young Master Bowen then." Wanru felt as though a huge burden had been lifted from her shoulders. "That's good." She looked at Lin Sun and said, "If anything happens when we reach Red Copper Mountain, I'll have to trouble you to help, fellow Taoist." Lin Sun nodded. Uncle Jiao smiled. "Don't worry, mistress. In my opinion, no matter how deplorable that Tao Lord Crimson Fiend is, he won't dare to go back on his word on this matter." Lin Sun could not help but ask, "Uncle Jiao, do you know that person well?" Uncle Jiao replied, "I can't say that I know him well. However, I've heard that Tao Lord Crimson Fiend isn't someone who goes back on his word all these years. Young master, you might not know this, but reputation is sometimes more important than strength in this turbulent and bloody chaotic demon sea. Tao Lord Crimson Fiend's reputation isn't bad. Since that's the case, why did he ambush old Kuan back then and do something so detrimental to his reputation? After all, old Kuan can be considered as a regular in the chaotic demon sea and knows quite a number of people from major factions. In fact, some factions even need old Kuan's help to purchase cultivation resources from the outside world. Isn't Tao Lord Crimson Fiend aware that doing so would incur the displeasure of other factions?" Lin Sun was puzzled. Uncle Jiao let out a long sigh. "At the end of the day, it's all because of the Kuan ancestors' destiny bone. The allure of that treasure is simply too great. That Tao Lord Crimson Fiend must have gotten news of it from somewhere, that's why he acted so viciously back then. Wan Ro's eyes were cold. It's precisely because of that I won't trust him no matter how good his reputation is. I can only hope that he won't do something so despicable again. Lin Sun smiled and did not say anything. That very day, the group left Thousand Blessings Island on a treasured vessel. Red Copper Mountain was a unique mountain that floated above the ocean. It was scarlet red in color and was extremely eye-catching. Due to the chaotic spatial laws of the world, the location of this mountain was constantly changing and was not fixed. Even if an enemy came looking for it, it was very likely that they would not be able to find it. Uncle Jiao had already found out the location of Red Copper Mountain on Thousand Blessings Island. In just half a day they saw this unique floating mountain from afar. Woo woo woo, a boundless horn sounded from the top of the Red Copper Mountain. Immediately after, the restrictive power covering the entire Red Copper Mountain was opened. Are you guests of the Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce? A group of cultivators with ferocious auras charged out and looked at the treasured vessel that Lin Sun and the others were on. That's right. Uncle Jiao stood at the bow and said in a deep voice, "Our Tao Lord has already received the news. Everyone, please follow me," a middle-aged man with a goatee who looked like a scholar said in a clear voice. At this moment, Wan Ro could not help but feel a little nervous. She could not help but glance at Lin Sun. Lin Sun patted her shoulder gently and said, "It's fine." Uncle Jiao also said, "Miss, with young Master Shi Yu and this old servant here, you definitely won't encounter any danger." Wan Ro nodded and led the way towards Red Copper Mountain. Lin Sun and Uncle Jiao followed closely behind. As for the guards of the Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce, they were stationed on the treasured vessel. "Everyone, please." The middle-aged scholar led the way in front. Red Copper Mountain was extremely majestic. There were many grotto heavens built on it. When Lin Sun and the others appeared, ferocious auras swept out from those grotto heavens and sized them up coldly. This caused Wan Ro's delicate body to stiffen slightly. However, Lin Sun did not seem to feel it at all. He was sizing up a mountain with interest. Soon, the group arrived at the peak of the mountain. There stood a majestic palace shrouded in smoke and clouds. Its entire body was made of golden divine metal, and it was brilliant and dazzling. In front of the palace stood a tall and mighty figure. He wore a scarlet cloak, and his entire body was surging with murderous aura. He looked extremely imposing. Tao Lord Crimson Fiend. Ha ha, the esteemed guests of the Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce are finally here. Hurry up and invite them in. Tao Lord Crimson Fiend let out a hearty laugh when he saw Lin Sun's group, his voice reverberating through the clouds. Wan Ro's eyes were filled with a bone-deep hatred. This was the person who severely injured her father and took her younger brother hostage. "We're not here as guests," she took a deep breath of air. "Hand over my younger brother and I'll give you that treasure immediately." Tao Lord Crimson Fiend's smile faded. "Fine, we'll make a deal then. Men, bring young Master Bowen over." Understood. The middle-aged scholar left with the order. Before long, he returned with a skinny man in black robes. The man was rather handsome and bore a resemblance to Wan Ro upon closer inspection. It was her younger brother, Bowen. "Sister, why are you here? It's too dangerous here. Hurry and leave." Bowen, who was initially numb with a blank expression, was clearly surprised when he saw Wan Ro and shouted anxiously. Wan Ro's eyes were red and moist. "Bowen, I'm here to save you. Don't panic, I'll bring you home right away. Father has been looking forward to your return. Do you see that? I've not mistreated young Master Bowen all these years. I served him well and didn't let him suffer in the slightest." Tao Lord Crimson Fiend placed his hands behind his back and his scarlet cape fluttered. "Now, as long as you hand over that treasure, you can take him away. Bring Bowen over first." Wan Ro took a deep breath and said, "Ha ha ha, do you think I'll go back on my word in my territory? Forget it, I can't be bothered to argue with a little girl like you. Tao Lord Crimson Fiend roared in laughter and gave the order. Release him. The middle-aged scholar retracted his hand and Bowen was instantly freed. He flew to Wan Ro's side with an expression of unconcealable excitement and joy. Wan Ro tugged at Bowen's hand and sized him up. She was only relieved after confirming that he was uninjured and said gently, "Brother, you've suffered for all these years." Far away, Tao Lord Crimson Fiend said in a deep voice, "Lass, it's time for you to hand over the treasure now." Chapter 27:16. Wanru couldn't help looking at Lin Sun. Lin Sun nodded. Wan Ro took out a ruler-shaped jade box and passed it over. Tao Lord Crimson Fiend took them in his hands right away and checked them with his spirit consciousness. Instantly, he revealed a look of satisfaction and joy. He carefully kept the jade box and said, "Not bad. It is indeed the innate life bone of the Kuan ancestor. You may leave now." "Miss, let's go," Uncle Jiao said. Wan Ro took her brother Bo An's hand and turned to leave. At this moment, she was extremely nervous, afraid that Tao Lord Crimson Fiend would change his mind. However, nothing changed even after they left Scarlet Copper Mountain. Tao Lord Crimson Fiend did not chase after them either. Wan Ro couldn't help but be surprised by this, and it was like a false alarm. Not long after returning to the treasured ship, Uncle Jiao said, "Miss, since we've already rescued young Master Bowen, let's split up. I'll go trade with the other forces in the chaotic Demon Sea, and you'll bring young Master Bo and along to help young Master Shiryu search. With young Master Shiryu around, I'm sure there won't be any more accidents along the way." "All right." Wan Ro thought for a moment and agreed. Uncle Jiao immediately turned around and left. Watching him leave, Lin Sun suddenly said, "Miss Wanru, please settle your brother down first. I have another thing to talk with you." Wan Ro paused for a moment, then nodded in agreement and led Bowen into the cabin. Not long after, she returned alone and asked, "Young master, what's the matter?" "Drive the treasure ship away from here first," Lin Sun said. Although Wan Ro felt that it was strange, she still did as she was told. After 10 minutes, Lin Sun looked at Wanru and said, "Do you feel that this operation is too smooth?" Wan Ro nodded. "It has indeed exceeded my expectations. From the looks of it, Uncle Jiao is right. Although that Tao Lord Crimson Fiend is a little despicable, he's a man of his word." Lin Sun smiled meaningfully. "Put away the treasure ship. I'll take you to see a good show." "A good show?" Wan Ro vaguely felt that there seemed to be something wrong, but she could not tell what it was. Puzzled, she raised her hand. The treasured ship behind him shrank into a sparkling and translucent snow-white gourd and fell into his palm. "Let's go." With a wave of his sleeves, Lin Sun and Wanru disappeared immediately. After a while, Wan Ro's clear eyes couldn't help but constrict when she saw Lin Sun bring her back to Copper Mountain, and she was just about to ask when Lin Sun shook his head and stopped her. "Watch the show first." The red Copper Mountain was covered with layers of restrictive power, but it was like nothing to Lin Sun. He took Wan Ro and quietly sneaked into the red Copper Mountain. Moreover, he did not alert anyone along the way. Wan Ro's strained heart finally calmed down slightly when she saw this scene. In next to no time, the two of them arrived at a layer of clouds not far away from the summit of the mountain. Looking at the magnificent palace in the distance, Lin Sun transmitted his voice, "Look who is in the hall." Wan Ro looked over, and her delicate body instantly stiffened. Her eyes slowly widened, and an expression of disbelief appeared on her fair and exquisite oval face. She saw a figure seated high up in the center of the hall. It wasn't Tao Lord Crimson Fiend. It was someone Wan Ro couldn't be more familiar with. Uncle Jiao. At this moment, he didn't look like a servant at all. His back was ramrod straight, and his hands were casually placed on the chair. His eyes were slightly narrowed, and he looked like a dragon crouching in a crouching position. He was extremely domineering. In front of him knelt a person in an extremely eye-catching scarlet cloak. It was Dowlord Crimson Fiend. Wanro felt as if she was struck by lightning when she saw this scene. Her mind went blank, and her hands and feet went cold. How could this be? Are you surprised? Actually, the biggest traitor isn't Runyue, but you, Uncle Jiao, who seems to be loyal and devoted. Lin Sun's voice sounded in Wanro's ears. The latter's body trembled slightly, and it was obvious that she was extremely furious. She couldn't even believe or accept all of this. Many years ago, Uncle Jiao had been by her father's side, and he was one of Old Kuan's right-hand men. He followed Old Kuan in and out of the Anarchy Demon Sea all year round. It could be said that the entire Nine Leaves Chamber of Commerce had absolute trust in Uncle Jiao. However, who would have thought that such a loyal and devoted old man was actually a hidden traitor? This blow was too heavy. Even though she saw it with her own eyes, Wanro couldn't accept it for a moment. Her mind went blank. How could this be? How could this be? She only returned to her senses after a long while. Her expression was mixed with anger and disappointment as she said via voice transmission, "Young master, how did you find out? It's quite a coincidence. Heng Tianxiao had once suppressed Uncle Jiao on the treasured vessel, and I noticed that something was off at that time," replied Lin Sun via voice transmission. "In my opinion, Uncle Jiao's cultivation is absolutely above Heng Tianxiao's. Even if he suffered a sudden attack, it's impossible for him to be suppressed by Heng Tianxiao in a short period of time. But you know the situation at that time as well. Uncle Jiao was suppressed soundlessly in an extremely short period of time. This is very unusual. Later on, I returned to the cabin to investigate carefully, but I didn't find any traces of a battle. This can only prove that there's another reason why Uncle Jiao was suppressed. Of course, I was only suspicious at that time. I didn't dare confirm that there was something wrong with Uncle Jiao. Later on, you told me that only you and your father knew about the Kuan ancestor's natal bone. Even if Runyue is a traitor, she isn't qualified to pry into such a secret at all. But it's different if it's Uncle Jiao. He's the person your father trusts the most. I think it wouldn't be too difficult for him to pry into such a secret." When she heard this, Wanra's pretty face had already turned pale, and she said with shock and anger, "No wonder Uncle Jiao suddenly stepped forward and killed Runyue when I was questioning her on the ship. Was he worried that I'd find out something?" Lin Sun said, "If that's all, it wouldn't be enough to prove that there's something wrong with Uncle Jiao. When we arrived at Thousand Blessings Island, Uncle Jiao took the initiative to ask for information about Taoist Crimson Demon. I used some methods to follow him from behind, and then I saw many interesting things." As he spoke, he flipped his palm, causing a screen of light to float up into appearance, and then numerous scenes flickered into appearance in space. In the screen, Uncle Jiao was hurrying forward alone, and he finally arrived at a hall. The screen changed, and Uncle Jiao was standing in the hall with a group of cultivators kneeling beside him. At this moment, Uncle Jiao was like a ruler. His voice was deep and filled with great dignity. "Go back and tell Crimson Demon that there's been a change in the operation this time. When I bring Wanru to Scarlet Copper Mountain, make him hand over bow and obediently." "Yes." The cultivators kneeling on the ground accepted the order. "Remember, don't let him act on his own. Otherwise, I won't let him off." Uncle Jiao's eyes were cold, and the 3 centipede-like scars on his face looked extremely hideous. The screen ended there. Wanru's expression was a mix of green and white. Uncontrollable anger and disappointment intertwined in her heart, and her entire body was trembling. After seeing this, how could she not understand that the new Uncle Jiao that she and her father had recruited was actually a traitor? "You saw the transaction on Scarlet Copper Mountain just now. It went extremely smoothly. Why did it turn out like this? The answer lies with this Uncle Jiao." Lin Sun's gaze was deep. Lin Sun's eyes were deep. "Originally, I planned to capture this person when we were on the treasure ship just now, but he proposed to act alone and make some so-called deals. In this case, I'll beat him at his own game and take you to see this good show. As I expected, he returned to Scarlet Copper Mountain immediately. He's probably worried that something might go wrong and wants to take away the Kuan ancestors' destiny bone. At this point, Wanru indeed saw Tao Lord Crimson Demon handing the jade box that contained the Kuan ancestors' destiny bone respectfully to Uncle Jiao, who was seated on the main seat in the hall. A look of joy appeared on the latter's face as he caressed the jade box with his hand and lamented, "For the sake of this treasure, I've endured bitterly for 1,000 years. Now that I've finally gotten what I wanted, I can't help but sigh. Master, it's all worth it for the past 1,000 years." Tao Lord Crimson Demon praised with a smile. If you had been more ruthless in that sneak attack a few years ago, old Kuan would have been killed long ago. Why would you have to wait till now? Uncle Jiao harumphed coldly. Tao Lord Crimson Demon was embarrassed and changed the topic. Master, why did you release old Kuan's son and daughter in the previous transaction? A look of indignation appeared on Uncle Jiao's face as he said hatefully, "I didn't expect that such a ruthless character would appear on that treasure vessel. His strength is unimaginably strong, and even I'm extremely wary of him. If not for his presence, we wouldn't have to wait till now. Back in Black Fiend Cloud Sea, things could have been settled easily." Tao Lord Crimson Demon was stunned. Master, are you talking about that young man who was standing beside Wanra earlier on? He doesn't look like anything special. Uncle Jiao's expression changed as he sneered. What do you know? The more ordinary a figure seems to be, the more ruthless he is. Hung Tianshao and the other members of the Hung clan were completely annihilated because they underestimated this person. If I didn't warn you in advance earlier, then this kid's ability would be sufficient to overturn this Crimson Copper Mountain. Tao Lord Crimson Demon gasped. If that's the case, that lad is indeed terrifying, extremely terrifying. However, are we just going to watch old Kuan's son and daughter leave the Chaos Fiend Sea just like that? Uncle Jiao replied coldly, "Don't worry, they won't be far from death after they return." Hung Tianshao and the others died on the 9 Leaves Merchant Guild's treasure vessel. The Heng family will only blame this on the 9 Leaves Merchant Guild. At that point, a playful smile appeared on Uncle Jiao's scarred face as he spoke leisurely. "Even if that lad doesn't kill them, I'll attack and kill all of them when they snatch the Kuan ancestors' destiny bone. After that, I'll just blame it on the 9 Leaves Merchant Guild." Tao Lord Crimson Demon praised instantly, "Master, what a scheme!" In the distance, Wan Ro, who saw this scene, was angered to the point that her pretty face turned ghastly pale, and her eyes were filled with surging flames of rage. Chapter 27:17. Looking at Wanra's pretty face that was pale with anger, Lin soon knew that Uncle Jiao's betrayal was undoubtedly a heavy blow to her. "It's not too late to realize it now," Lin Sun said softly. Lin Sun said softly, "At least, the real disaster has not befallen you and the 9 Leaves Chamber of Commerce." Wan Ro said bitterly, "Child, since you've already seen through the truth, why didn't you expose Jiao Taixing's ugly face?" Jiao Taixing was Uncle Jiao's name. Lin Sun said, "There was no proof at that time. After all, Uncle Jiao was your most trusted elder. If I, an outsider, told you the truth directly, I'm afraid it would cause misunderstandings and backfire. It's better to take this opportunity to let you witness the show with your own eyes. Then, the truth will be revealed." Wan Ro was embarrassed and somewhat disappointed when she spoke of misunderstandings. Her personal maid, Runyue, had become a spy of the Heng family. Uncle Jiao, whom she trusted the most, was a traitor who harbored evil intentions. On the other hand, Lin Sun, a passerby who joined the group by accident, had helped her resolve a murderous crisis along the way and uncovered a monstrous conspiracy. This made Wan Ro feel even more upset. "Child, what should we do next?" she couldn't help asking. Even she didn't realize that subconsciously, she had developed a kind of trust in Lin Sun. "Of course, we'll completely solve this hidden danger. As Lin Sun spoke, he had already moved through the void with Wan Ro, heading towards the great hall on the mountain peak in the distance. At the same time, in the great hall, Jiao Taixing, who was sitting in the central seat, seemed to have sensed something and suddenly looked out of the great hall. He saw Lin Sun's tall figure floating in front of the great hall with Wan Ro. You! Jiao Taixing's pupils constricted and his expression changed. He realized something was wrong. Taoist Lord Crimson Demon, who was kneeling on the ground, also stood up. When he saw Lin Sun and Wan Ro who had returned, he couldn't help but be astonished. He asked in disbelief, "How did you enter Red Copper Mountain? How could the restrictive power covering the Red Copper Mountain stop young Master Shiryu?" Jiao Taixing sighed and got up from his seat. He looked at Wan Ro, who was full of anger. He knew clearly that the matter had probably been completely exposed. With a complicated look in his eyes, he looked at Lin Sun and said, "Young Master Shiryu, there's no enmity between us. Moreover, I've been extremely respectful to you all along the way, and I've never neglected you in the slightest. Why do you just have to get involved? Can't I help when I see injustice?" Lin Sun said calmly. The corners of Jiao Taixing's mouth twitched. How could he possibly believe such a stupid reason? "Jiao Taixing, when has my father ever mistreated you? Yet you chose to betray him for the sake of a treasure. You even wanted to use the Hung clan to destroy the Nine-Leaf Trading Company. Aren't you too despicable?" Wan Ro could no longer restrain the anger in her heart and spoke in a stern voice. Jiao Taixing had already calmed down at this moment, and he sighed lightly. "Little girl, you don't understand the enmity between me and your father at all." He pointed at the 3 hideous centipede-like scars on his face and said in a cold voice, "Weren't you curious before why I didn't remove these scars? Now let me tell you, because these scars were given to you by your father." His voice was filled with intense hatred. Wan Ro's expression changed and she said, "That's impossible. If my father hated you, how could he keep you by his side?" Lin Sun patted her shoulder and said, "Let's hear what he has to say first." Jiao Taixing sneered, "That's because your father doesn't know the origin of these 3 scars at all. Since you've seen through some of the truth today, I won't hide it anymore. I'll let you know what kind of ruthless, cruel, and despicable person your most respected father is." He took a deep breath, a look of reminiscence in his eyes, and he said in a low voice, "I'll never forget that 3,403 years ago, your father, my junior sister, and I decided to go to the Aurora Cave. The Aurora Cave, like the magnetic wind belt, it was one of the 3 great forbidden areas of the Chaos Demon Sea. A long time ago, Jiao Taixing, his junior sister, Xuefian, and old Kuan went to the Aurora Cave to search for a heaven-defying fortune. At that time, Xuefian held a secret map in her hand. According to the secret map, the 3 of them arrived at the Aurora Cave without any mishap and successfully obtained that heaven-defying fortune. A congenital natal bone belonging to ancestor Kuan. At that time, the 3 of them were ecstatic, but on the way back, an accident happened. Old Kuan was the first to walk out of the Aurora Cave, but when Jiao Taixing left, he was stopped by his junior sister, Xuefian. When he spoke up to hear, Jiao Taixing revealed a furious and pained expression. "Never had I imagined that my junior sister would actually make me swear that I wouldn't fight for the Kuan ancestors' origin bone. She said that it's a fortune that was specially prepared for the Kuan ancestor, and if I dared to fight for it, then she would become hostile with me." His eyes were red, his beard and hair stood up in anger, and his expression became ferocious. "That's my most beloved junior sister. But she didn't hesitate to threaten me for old Kuan." Lin Sun and Wanru couldn't help being stunned. Jiao Taixing was completely immersed in the past grievances and hatred at this moment, and said in a hoarse voice, "Of course I won't agree. I fought hard all the way to get the Kuan ancestor Kuan's natal bone. Why should I let old Kuan enjoy it alone?" What makes me most sad and angry is that this request was made by my junior sister. She didn't know how heavy a blow it was to me. Jiao Taixing's face showed pain. Your most beloved woman didn't hesitate to turn against you and threaten you for another man. Have you ever experienced this feeling? Lin Sun had a strange look in his eyes. He really hadn't experienced it, but didn't Dishi have a similar experience? Of course I won't agree. Jiao Taixing's face was distorted, and he said coldly, but what I never thought was that my junior sister would really turn against me regardless of years of friendship. His voice was full of unspeakable anger and grief. And then? Lin Sun asked. Ha ha ha, I killed her in a rage. Jiao Taixing laughed, but his laughter was sad. The scar on my face was left by my junior sister before she died. Even in death, she protected old Kun. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and said, so this matter has nothing to do with old Kun at all. How can it have nothing to do with him? Jiao Taixing stared at Lin Sun angrily. If he didn't cheat my junior sister's heart, how could she turn against me? This fellow is the most despicable. He wants to monopolize the Kun ancestors' origin bone, yet he wants my junior sister to step forward and stop me. Because he knows very well that I'm infatuated with my junior sister, and I'm obedient to her every whim. So long as my junior sister makes a request, I very rarely refuse. Old Kun has taken a fancy to this, and that's why he's using my junior sister. This is all your side of the story. It's you who killed your junior sister. What does it have to do with my father? Wanru said angrily. No, my junior sister died because of him. Jiao Taixing's eyes were terrifyingly cold. After my junior sister died, I vowed to avenge her and take back the Kun ancestors' life bone that originally belonged to me. It's ridiculous that my junior sister died because of your father, but your father didn't care at all. Soon after he left Aurora Cave, he married your mother. Since you hate old Kun so much, why did you endure for so many years until now? Lin Sun asked. Jiao Taixing sneered. If I only killed old Kun, it would be too easy for him. Everything I've planned all these years is to destroy the entire nine-leaf chamber of commerce and kill all his relatives and friends. I'll let this despicable and shameless bastard lose everything. Isn't it nice to kill him then? Wanru felt cold in her heart. Only now did she understand how crazy Jiao Taixing's revenge was. It's a pity that at the last moment, the whole action failed because of you, an outsider. Jiao Taixing looked at Lin Sun with a complicated expression. Have you finished? Lin Sun's eyes were indifferent and calm. Jiao Taixing was stunned and couldn't help asking, do you think I'm wrong to do so? Lin Sun laughed and said, right or wrong after all is your side of the story. Do you think you can change my opinion of you with your words just now? Jiao Taixing frowned and said, I'm very puzzled. You're just an outsider. Why do you insist on getting involved in this matter? Does it have anything to do with you? The grace of a drop of water should be repaid with a gushing spring, can't you? Lin Sun said. Jiao Taixing's old face turned ugly. Previously, he said that he would help out when he saw injustice, but now he was repaying the grace of a drop of water with a gushing spring. Who would believe such nonsense? I understand now. You're doing this for the Kun ancestors' life bone. He suddenly came to a realization and said with a look of realization, ha ha ha, that's right. People are tempted by wealth, not to mention such a treasure. Lin Sun said with a calm expression, are these your last words? Jiao Taixing took a deep breath and said, fellow Taoist, are you really going to be so ruthless? Clang. Suddenly, Taoist Lord Crimson Demon, who had been silent all this while, rushed out, activating a blood-colored halberd and slashing at Lin Sun. At the same time, Jiao Taixing waved his sleeve and a snow-white divine chain whizzed out. Its target was not Lin Sun, but Wanru, who was beside him. Clearly, he was planning to use Wanru as a hostage to threaten Lin Sun. This was undoubtedly a wise choice. It could also be seen that Jiao Taixing had long regarded Lin Sun as a lifelong enemy. Otherwise, he would not have chosen to use Wanru as a breakthrough point. You're just struggling on your deathbed. Lin Sun stood still and flicked his finger. Clang! The blood-colored halberd shattered inch by inch. Taoist Lord Crimson Demon, who was holding the halberd, was sent flying into the air and smashed into a distant wall, blood spurting from his mouth and nose. As for the snow-white divine chain that Jiao Taixing released, Lin Sun reached out and grabbed it as if he was grabbing a snake's weak point. The snow-white divine chain buzzed and trembled violently, unable to break free. However, Jiao Taixing was not alarmed. Instead, he was delighted. He revealed a hideous smile and lightly uttered an obscure Dao sound. Explode. Chapter 27:18. Bang! The snow-white divine chains exploded one by one, bursting forth with a dazzling torrent of order flames that drowned Lin Sun. Standing beside Lin Sun, Wanru's pretty face turned pale with fright, as if she had fallen into an ice cave. Not far away, Jiao Taixing laughed heartily. So what if your battle prowess is heaven-defying? Even if you are enveloped by the Aurora Order flames, you will still suffer. Is that so? Aren't you celebrating too early? An indifferent voice sounded, and the white flames of order disappeared like clay oxen entering the sea, revealing Lin Sun's tall figure. Completely unharmed. Jiao Taixing's smile froze and his eyeballs almost popped out. Even an immortal would be severely injured by such power. How did you block it? Not only did he block it, but he was also unharmed. This was inconceivable. Even Wanru couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Even the power of order couldn't kill him? Wasn't this young master sure you a little too strong? This is the order flames you collected from the Aurora Divine Cave? Lin Sun asked curiously. The calmer and more casual he was, the more terrified and panicked Jiao Taixing became. He couldn't imagine when such a heaven-defying young man appeared in the sixth heaven. Who the hell are you? Jiao Taixing's eyes widened in anger as he hissed. Master, he's most likely Lin Sun. Lord Crimson Demon, who was bleeding from his nose and mouth, shouted in the distance. Lin Sun? Jiao Taixing was startled at first, then his expression changed abruptly. He couldn't help but recall the various rumors about Fang Xiuan's successor in recent years. According to the rumors, Lin Sun had slaughtered his way from the first heaven to the fifth, setting off a reign of terror. Even the immortal emperor clans couldn't do anything to him. Even if the immortal emperor clans took action, he could escape safely time and time again. It could be said that in the sixth heaven, Fang Xiuan's successor, Lin Sun, represented a legend that no one could surpass. A peerless and ruthless person that gave the immortal emperor clans headaches. If this sure you was Fang Xiuan's successor, then everything that happened along the way could be easily explained. The deaths of those from the Heng family weren't unjust. Because in this world, there was definitely a place for Lin Sun among those who dared to kill people from immortal emperor clans. Moreover, he was the one who received the most attention in recent years. You talk too much. At this moment, Lin Sun had already taken action. His sleeves fluttered, and overwhelming sword chi burst out, covering the entire hall. Jiao Taixing resisted desperately, yet it was in vain. In the blink of an eye, his body was slashed into pieces by the boundless sword lights, and he let out a miserable and sorrowful howl before his death. To be able to die in the hands of a legend like you, it's not a loss. As for Lord Crimson Fiend, he was in an even worse state. He was unable to defend against such a killing blow and perished instantly, dissipating under the boundless sword chi. When everything returned to silence, the hall was already riddled with holes, and it was branded with horrifying cracks and marks of the sword. Are you really Lin Sun? Wanru's eyes were in a trance. Everything that she had experienced today had shocked her so much that her mind was in a daze. Lin Sun said in a gentle voice, "It doesn't matter whether it is true or not. What matters is that although Jiao Taixing is dead, you should consider how to help your father resolve the danger from the Heng family. Wanru shuddered. After a moment of silence, she nodded. Let's go. Lin Sun looked out of the hall and left. Looking at his tall and aloof figure, Wanru murmured in her heart. No matter who he is, he's the benefactor of my 9 Leaves Merchant Guild. That's enough, Anarchy Demon Sea. The 9 Leaves Merchant Guild's treasured ship was flying through the air. Young master, please accept this treasure. Wanru passed the jade box that contained the Kuan ancestors' origin bone to Lin Sun. At this moment, she had completely calmed down from the soul-stirring experience. I didn't help you for this, said Lin Sun casually. Wanru said seriously, I'm unable to repay your great kindness. If you don't accept this treasure, I'm afraid I'll never be able to rest at ease for the rest of my life. Lin Sun was stunned, but he did not decline and said, Then I'll be impolite. To be honest, he was indeed very curious about the Kuan ancestors' origin bone. Only then did Wanru reveal a relaxed smile. She said, Next, I'll use all the resources of the 9 Leaves Merchant Guild to help you find him. I'll leave the Anarchy Demon Sea once there's some progress. This will probably take up a lot of time. In my opinion, it's best if you go back and see your father as soon as possible and tell him everything that happened, reminded Lin Sun. Wanru smiled and said, I've already sent people back to the Anarchy Demon Sea in advance. My father will understand everything once he obtains my jade slip. In reality, I plan to invite my father to the Anarchy Demon Sea. At the very least, I won't have to fear the Heng clan's revenge here. Lin Sun thought about it and said, That's a good idea indeed. Wanru left not long after. Lin Sun sat cross-legged on the bed and opened the sealed jade box. Immediately, an ancient and primordial aura of immortality spread out, causing Lin Sun's spirits to rise. The jade box shone brilliantly like a vast starry world. A complete Kuan ancestor's bone floated in the starry sky. It covered an area of 5,000 kilometers, and it was a shocking sight. Strands of the aura of immortality suffused out from the Kuan ancestor's bone, and it was boundlessly divine. It was too huge and completely preserved, and it lay across the starry sky. Even though only a skeleton remained, it still emanated an oppressive feeling that assaulted one's face. When Lin Sun's divine sense entered into the Kuan ancestor's bone to sense it, he faintly seemed to see a Kuan soaring out from an expanse of chaos. Its wings were like clouds that covered the sky, and it blotted out the sun as it leaped into the starry sky. Kuan, a type of innate divine beast that only existed in ancient legend. According to legend, it was born from the chaos, and it possessed the supreme might to split the heavens and the earth and separate the pure from the pure when it was born. Its bloodline was branded with the profundities of chaos, and its strength carried the most primordial profundities of the Grand Tao. Its natural talent was even said to stand above the myriad of races in the universe. Everyone in the world said that the Kuan was the innate divine beast that was the closest to eternity, and it was a terrifying being that could rival the eternal god clan. According to legend, if one was able to obtain the Kuan ancestor's bone, then one would be able to comprehend the most primordial profundities of eternity from within it. Yet now, such a complete Kuan ancestor's bone was right before Lin Sun's eyes. This caused his heart to burn with excitement. With Lin Sun's current cultivation, there were very few treasures in the world that could attract his attention. But the Kuan ancestor's bone before him made him unable to help but be moved and excited. The reason was very simple. This treasure was indeed as rumored, and it was branded with the primordial profundities of immortality. And this was exactly what he needed the most at the moment. After Zhu Xian reached the extreme perfection of the ancestral realm, there was only a threshold between him and the immortal way. But this threshold was too high, and it was so high that Lin Sun was still unable to step into it. It wasn't that his cultivation wasn't strong enough, but he lacked the opportunity. If he couldn't grasp this opportunity, even if he cultivated diligently and painstakingly for thousands of years, he was bound to be unable to touch the threshold of the immortal way. In other words, breaking through to the immortal realm had nothing to do with diligent and painstaking cultivation, and it had nothing to do with one's own willpower and wisdom. Instead, it required an epiphany. Perhaps it was a sudden whim, perhaps it was an inadvertent flash of inspiration, or perhaps it was a faint feeling that was produced in the dark. All of them would form an opportunity to break through. However, such an opportunity was too rare, too difficult to come by, and it was impossible to come by at all. It was profound within mysteries, and it was terrifying. But now that he possessed the Kuan ancestor's lifebone, it was different. It innately contained bone markings and aura related to the immortal way, and it was the most primitive. So long as he calmly sensed and comprehended it, he would be able to understand and pry into the immortal way step by step. All of this could greatly increase a cultivator's chances of obtaining an epiphany. Yes, it was merely an opportunity. But even then, its value was so great that it was sufficient to make imperial ancestor realm existences in the world go mad, and they would even be willing to give up everything for such an opportunity. This was the reason why Lin Sun was excited in his heart. He lacked such an opportunity as well, but he'd never cared about it. Because at the bottom of it all, he'd merely spent less than 100 years on the Emperor's path to the perfection of the imperial ancestor realm, and he had plenty of time to grasp and comprehend that opportunity to break through in the future. But now, with the Kuan ancestor's lifebone, everything would be different. After a long time, Lin Sun put away the jade box that contained the Kuan ancestor's lifebone, and he sighed endlessly with emotion in his heart. One cause and one effect were not a coincidence. If he hadn't helped Wanru along the way, how could he have obtained such an opportunity? In the following period of time, Wanru steered the treasure ship and took Lin Sun around the Chaos Demon Sea to inquire about Lu Boya. Lin Sun didn't reveal Master Lu's name, fearing that it would cause unnecessary trouble. After all, a long time ago, Master Lu had accompanied the Master of Tongtian to conquer the heavens and served the Luo family. If someone noticed that he was looking for Master Lu, the news that Master Lu was hiding in the Chaos Demon Sea might be exposed. On the way, Lin Sun also learned more about the situation in the Chaos Demon Sea. The Chaos Demon Sea was like a labyrinth, and the order of space was extremely chaotic. Here, there were countless forces, large and small, and most of the small forces were formed by bandits and villains without any foundation. There were only 7 that could truly be called the top forces, and they were known as the 7 great demon sects. For example, the Luin Temple on the Thousand Blessings Island belonged to the Luin Demon Sect, one of the 7 demonic sects, and it was rumored that each of the 7 demonic sects had an immortal figure. But whether it was true or not, outsiders didn't know. In addition to the 7 demonic sects, there were also many solitary and ruthless figures in the Chaos Demon Sea, and most of them had extremely terrifying strength. Even the 7 demonic sects feared some of these ruthless figures. And as Lin Sun gradually understood, the biggest impression that the Chaos Demon Sea gave Lin Sun was chaos. Bloody killings could be seen everywhere, and there was a scene of unrest everywhere. Annexation between forces, vendettas between cultivators. It was simply a common sight. P.S. First, send 4 consecutive chapters. At around 6 o'clock in the evening, I will try to make 3 consecutive chapters. Chapter 27:19. On the way to find Master Lu, Lin Sun would encounter 7 or 8 incidents related to killing almost every day. Lin Sun was shocked at first, but he gradually got used to it and even became numb to it. The reputation of the 9 Leaves Chamber of Commerce was not always effective. Some fearless desperados once attacked the treasure ship and tried to rob it. But without exception, they all ended up miserable. Lin Sun didn't even need to do anything. The guards on the ship were more than what these desperados could fight against. In fact, even in the eternal world, the Emperor realm was an existence that cultivators could only look up to. As for the immortal realm, they were comparable to the supreme gods. Even in this chaotic demon sea, there were relatively few people who had stepped into the martial emperor realm. For Lin Sun, he could kill emperor ancestors easily. Was the emperor ancestor realm not powerful enough? No. Lin Sun's current combat power was invincible among the emperor realm. At least in the eyes of all living beings, Lin Sun was a terrifying existence that was beyond their reach. 1 month later, the treasure ship returned to the Thousand Blessings Island. Under Wanru's lead, they had met dozens of forces in the Chaos Demon Sea, but none of them had seen Master Lu in the portrait. This made Lin Sun frown. He was very suspicious. If Master Lu was really hiding in the Chaos Demon Sea, he would have hidden his identity and even changed his appearance. With Master Lu's ability, even if he changed his appearance, very few people would be able to see through him. All this made Lin Sun realize that if he continued to search aimlessly, it would be no different from looking for a needle in a haystack. Lin Sun didn't feel discouraged, but Wanru felt a little apologetic. At first, she said she would try her best to help Lin Sun find Master Lu. But a month had passed and there was no clue. This inevitably made her feel a little depressed. Luin House. Wanru came again, but she also got bad news from the manager of Luin House. You've been very diligent. Don't blame yourself. Lin Sun, who was waiting in the hall of Luin House, saw Wanru walking over with a frown, and immediately comforted her. Child, do you have any other clues besides this portrait? Wanru asked. Lin Sun said with a smile, Miss Wanru, leave it to me to find people. Wanru was startled and said, Young master intends to act alone? Lin Sun nodded. In the past month, I have roughly understood some of the situation in Chaos Demon Sea. It is enough for me to deal with everything by myself. Wanru was obviously reluctant to part with him, and she said, Then, will I be able to see young master again in the future? That's hard to say. Lin Sun laughed. A sense of loss surged into Wanru's heart, and she said, This world is too huge. Even if it's cultivators of our generation, if we're separated, then we might never be able to meet again in this lifetime. Lin Sun felt the same way. Back then, when he left the small Feiyun village, he had experienced the Xiao Empire, the ancient Desolation Realm, the Starry Sky Ancient Path, and the vast 1,000 battlefields. He had also made many good friends along the way. Yet now, all of them were far apart from each other, and they were searching for their own paths towards the Tao. So, it was unknown when they would meet again. Wanru raised her clear eyes, took a deep breath, and said, Let's not talk about those disappointing things. Before we part, I hope young master can find the person you're looking for as soon as possible. Please take care of yourself, and we'll meet again if we're fated to. Lin Sun nodded. Take care of yourselves as well. If you encounter any troublesome matters, you can crush this token. So long as I'm still in Chaos Demon Sea, I'll definitely come see you as soon as possible. As he spoke, he passed a jade token branded with a trace of his willpower to Wanru. Not to mention anything else, just this rare treasure, the Kuan ancestor's bone, made Lin Sun feel grateful. It was just a jade token, and it should be taken as a token of his appreciation. Wanru carefully put away the jade token, and then she said with a smile, Now, I hope to use this jade token, yet I don't want to encounter any troublesome matters again. It's really quite a dilemma. Lin Sun couldn't help laughing. On that day, Lin Sun bid farewell to Wanru and left alone. It was also from this day onwards that Lin Sun was like a wandering passerby. He walked in Chaos Demon Sea, and every time he came to a populated place, he would enter it to explore. Just like that, 2 months passed in a hurry. On this day, the travel-worn Lin Sun stepped on the road to an island called Southern Sea. He wasn't in a hurry. Over the past 2 months, he had used the time to comprehend the mysteries of eternity on the Kuan ancestor's bone, and he had gained quite a lot of benefits. Eternity was a description of the realm that surpassed the Emperor realm. Anyone who stepped into this realm could live as long as the heavens. The heavens, here referred to the great Tao energy that was distributed in any world. In other words, even if the eternal true world was destroyed and disappeared, as long as the great Tao energy still existed in the world, those who stepped into this realm could live forever. This was fundamentally different from the path to immortality of the longevity tribulation realm. The eternity realm was divided into three great realms: same lifespan, nirvana, and transcendent. Those who could break through and step onto the path to immortality could be called the same lifespan realm, which meant that they could live as long as the heavens. Those who reached this realm could comprehend the power of order, and from there, condense their great Tao laws into the eternity laws. The higher the rank of the power of order, the stronger the power of the eternity laws condensed. It is worth mentioning that the division of the eternity laws also corresponds to the rank of the power of order. The two are complementary. For example, the eternity laws comprehended from the third level of the earth step are the third level of the earth step, and so on. At the same lifespan realm, the powerhouse who wields the eternity laws of the earth step is far inferior to the powerhouse who wields the eternity laws of the heaven step. Luo Yunshan, who was killed by Lin Sun at that time, wielded the power of the earth step. Among those at the same lifespan realm, he could be regarded as the most tyrannical existence. After all, in this sixth heaven, even though there are 24 immortal emperor clans, the immortal laws controlled by these immortal emperor clans are all at the earth step realm. Even the eternity laws condensed by these immortal emperors are only at the 9th level of the earth step realm. Therefore, the earth step immortal laws can be regarded as the best among the earth step. Lin Sun's greatest feeling when he was comprehending the immortal mysteries of the Kuan ancestors' life bone was that it was difficult. The mysteries were too profound, and even with his comprehension and understanding of the great Tao, he often felt that it was extremely strenuous. Moreover, the mysteries he could comprehend were extremely limited. This is normal, after all. He is only at the ancestor realm, and the mysteries imprinted on the Kuan ancestors' life bone can only be comprehended by those at the immortal realm. However, even so, Lin Sun has benefited a lot. His understanding of the immortal realm is no longer as vague and one-sided as before. Stop! Suddenly, a loud shout sounded in the distance. Lin Sun, who was thinking while rushing forward, looked up and saw a group of cultivators gathering in the sky above the distant sea. The leader was a rough man with a fierce aura, dressed in a blood-red robe, holding a trident that was overflowing with cold light. The cultivators around him also had a fierce aura, and they didn't hide their murderous intent at all. However, what amused Lin Sun is that the strongest cultivator in this group is only at the quasi-emperor realm, and the other cultivators are at the Saint King realm, Great Saint realm. It's even to the extent that a thin young man in black clothes is merely at the immortal tribulation realm. Lin Sun doesn't know whether to laugh or cry when he sees such a motley crew actually obstruct his path and rob him. In fact, these people can't be blamed for being blind. In order to avoid drawing too much attention, Lin Sun has restrained his cultivation to the extreme as he moves forward. Not to mention these people, even some Emperor Realm figures couldn't see through his cultivation. Originally, Lin Sun didn't intend to pay attention to them, but when his gaze inadvertently fell onto the thin young man in black clothes, he was stunned, and huge waves arose in his heart that was calm like a lake at this moment. This fellow is quite obedient. He doesn't seem to be a formidable figure. Let's go and search him. I hope he doesn't disappoint us. Seeing Lin Sun stop, those cultivators seem to be relieved, and then they swarm towards him like a swarm of bees with a grim smile. Friend, seeing that you're sensible, I'll give you a chance. Obediently hand over the treasures in your possession, and we'll naturally let you live. If you wait for us to make a move, haha, I'm afraid that you won't be able to leave alive at that time. The rugged man in a scarlet robe, the leader, sneered. Hurry up! Those cultivators urged sternly. To their surprise, the fat sheep, they regarded as obedient, didn't pay attention to them at all, but stared at the young man in black clothes among them. "What are you looking at?" Being stared at by Lin Sun, the young man in black clothes felt uncomfortable and shouted, "Show me the sword in your hand." When Lin Sun spoke, he had already stretched out his hand. With a clang, the sword in the young man's hand flew out and fell into Lin Sun's palm. He looked down at it and became more and more excited. At this time, the young man's face changed dramatically. He shouted anxiously, "Everyone, hurry up! That guy has robbed my treasures! Kill!" The leader in a scarlet robe shouted and waved his hand. All the people rushed up at once. Boom! In the sound of collision, these people were suppressed by a terrible force before they rushed forward. They couldn't move at all, like insects being slapped there. All of a sudden, they were completely shocked and realized that something was wrong. In the field, only the young man in black clothes stood there, but he was also frightened by this scene. His mind went blank and he stood there in a daze. The atmosphere was eerily silent. Lin Sun kept looking down at the sword, and his expression changed constantly. After a long time, he looked up at the young man in black clothes under the surprised and frightened eyes of all the people. "Where did you get this sword?" The voice was gentle, with a power that could reach people's hearts. The fear in the young man's heart was soothed by the power in the voice, and he calmed down. But he still looked surprised and fearful. He said in a trembling voice, "If you promise not to kill me, I'll tell you." Chapter 27:20. Lin Sun nodded and said, "Sure." The teenager in black seemed to be emboldened. He looked at his suppressed companions and said, "You can't kill them either. Otherwise, I'd rather die than tell you." Lin Sun was surprised and said with a smile, "As you wish." With his strength, if he hadn't been attracted by the sword in the teenager's hand, he wouldn't have cared about this robbery at all, or he wouldn't have bothered to do it. He could teleport away in a flash, so he wouldn't give the opponent any chance to rob him. For now, it didn't matter to him whether he killed these people or not. Perhaps Lin Sun's calm and gentle smile infected the teenager in black. After a moment of silence, he said, "This sword is a relic left to me by my father." "A relic?" Lin Sun frowned slightly and said, "Do you know where your father got this sword?" The teenager in black shook his head. "I don't know." Immediately, he seemed to be afraid that Lin Sun would go back on his words, so he said hurriedly, "But my father has been active in the sea area near South Sea Island. If you want to find out the origin of this sword, maybe you can go to South Sea Island and have a look." "Isn't South Sea Island the place I'm going to this time?" Lin Sun thought for a moment and said, "Come with me." The teenager in black's face suddenly turned pale. He thought that he would be killed by Lin Sun if he couldn't find out the origin of this sword. Lin Sun couldn't help but laugh. This boy was very vigilant and kind. At least he cared about the life and death of his companions, but he was a little timid. "Let's go. Whether I find the answer I want or not, I won't kill you." With that, Lin Sun waved his sleeves and teleported away with the teenager in black. After they watched them leave, those cultivators that were suppressed finally heaved sighs of relief, and they glanced at each other while they couldn't help but feel a lingering fear in their hearts. "What's your name?" Lin Sun asked on the way. "Feng Zhe." The teenager in black looked very honest. He had already recognized his situation. "Did your father tell you the real use of this sword?" Lin Sun asked casually. "Isn't this just a Saint-Tier battle sword?" Feng Zhe was confused. Lin Sun shook his head and said, "No, it's not just an ordinary saint-level treasure. I'll tell you when things are clear." Feng Zhe stared blankly and said, "Now that you mention it, I suddenly recall that my mother once said that the greatest treasure my father left me was this sword. She asked me to cherish it and never lose it. If it's really as you said, then this sword might really not be simple." "Where is your mother now?" Lin Sun thought of something. "It's on Southern Sea Island," Feng Zhe said. Lin Sun nodded. "After the time it takes to brew a cup of tea." An island the size of a floating continent appeared on the surface of the black seawater. It covered an area of 10,000 miles. Southern Sea Island. An extremely remote and barren island in the chaotic Demon Sea. Every once in a while, this island would be battered by storms in the sea, and it was to the extent that even the most ferocious and evil people weren't willing to reside in such a desolate place. However, for those practitioners who were forced to make a living, Southern Sea Island was undoubtedly a relatively safe place to live. The harsh and barren environment here could also provide them with shelter. After all, who would go to the slums to burn, kill, and loot? Lin Sun had traveled to different places in the chaotic Demon Sea before, but Southern Sea Island was the only place that he didn't go. Because this place was too barren, he subconsciously thought that Master Lu and the others would not hide here. But he didn't expect that on the way to Southern Sea Island, he would find the sword in Fengzhi's hand. So much so that at this moment some thoughts in his mind changed. Soon, Lin Sun and Fengzhi arrived at Southern Sea Island. As far as the eye could see, the island was full of scattered stone buildings, all of which were very simple and crude. Even the streets were winding and disorderly. Almost all the practitioners on the island were poor and destitute people of all realms, but there were no emperors, not even a few quasi-emperors. To Lin Sun's surprise, there were many children, teenagers, and young girls, who had been tempered by life at such a young age. Obviously, they were all children that were born and raised here. Otherwise, with their strength, it would have been impossible for them to enter the chaotic Demon Sea, and they were doomed to not survive in such a bloody and turbulent world. Looking at Fengzhi beside him, Lin Sun already knew that this boy had obviously grown up here. Southern Sea Island was very large, covering an area of thousands of miles. But every once in a while it would be attacked by storms in the sea, so there were very few suitable places on the island for living. Lin Sun scanned the island with his divine awareness, and soon got a general idea of the situation on the island. "Let's go, take me to see your mother," Lin Sun said. Fengzhi hesitated. Can you guarantee that you won't hurt my mother?" Lin Sun patted the boy's thin shoulder and said, "If I want to do that, I don't need you to lead the way. I can directly search your soul and find the answer from your memory." Fengzhi nodded and led the way first. After an hour, Fengzhi led Lin Sun to a simple stone house. A woman in plain clothes and braided hairpins was sewing an old battle robe in the stone house. She also had cultivation, but not high, only at the 7th level of the longevity calamity realm. Therefore, she didn't look old, but there was a lot of wind and frost accumulated between her eyebrows. With her cultivation, it was not easy for her to live in such a harsh and dangerous place. "Mother, I'm back." Fengzhi took a deep breath and said softly. The woman suddenly threw the battle robe in her hand to the ground and rushed out of the stone house angrily. "Tell me, did you go to the sea with those bastards to rob again? Do you know how your father died? Did you think it was easy for me to raise you all these years?" She scolded Fengzhi, and in the end, her eyes were red. If something happened to you, what should I do?" Fengzhi bowed his head and said, "Mother, there's a guest." Only then did the woman notice Lin Sun. She wiped the tears in her eyes and squeezed out a smile, saying, "I'm sorry, Lin Sun said in a gentle voice. "Parents all over the world care about their children. I think you're right. Even in a poor place, we should still have the ambition to rise. We shouldn't take the crooked path. Only in this way can we become great people in the future." The woman was stunned and said, "I still don't know your name and why you come here?" Lin Sun said with a smile, "The name is not important. I just want to know the origin of this sword." As he said, he took out the sword. The woman's face changed slightly and she said, This sword is left by my husband. Why is it in your hands?" There was suspicion and vigilance in her eyes. Fengzhi hurriedly said, "Mother, this senior is not a bad person. He just wants to know the origin of my father's sword. That's why I brought him here." Lin Sun nodded. Yes, the person who made this sword is very important to me. He is an elder of mine. I came to Chaos Demon Sea to find him." The woman relaxed her vigilance and said with a complicated look in her eyes, "I know about this. About 50 years ago, my husband's personal weapon was destroyed in a battle. Since then, he has been unable to recover. Without a weapon, it is too difficult for him to survive on South Sea Island. So I went to a weapon shop on the island, hoping to buy a suitable treasure for my husband. But I didn't have enough money. When I was about to leave, the owner of the weapon shop said that he could give me a treasure on credit, and that I would repay him when I have money in the future. Later, I found out that the owner of the weapon shop somehow learned that my husband had never burned, killed, or looted in these years. He was an upright and honorable man, so he was willing to give us the treasure on credit." Speaking of this, the woman's face was full of gratitude. "In fact, my husband and I both know that the owner of the weapon shop doesn't want us to repay him at all." Lin Sun was excited. He had roughly guessed the answer and asked, "Is the weapon shop on South Sea Island?" The woman nodded, "Yes." Lin Sun took a deep breath and suppressed his excitement. He looked at Feng Zhe and said, "Didn't you just ask me what the secret of this sword is? Let me show you." Clang! Lin Sun's fingertips gently touched the blade, and a strange sword sound rang out. The whole sword suddenly surged with a black torrent of power, covering Lin Sun's whole body. Under Feng Zhe's shocked gaze, the black power turned into a suit of armor, covering Lin Sun's head, shoulders, waist, abdomen, legs, and feet. The whole suit of armor and the sword in Lin Sun's hand were integrated, emitting cold and frightening waves of power. The woman's eyes were in a trance and she murmured, "Yes, that's it. My husband used this sword to repel many ferocious criminals." Feng Zhe was shocked, and his eyes became fanatical. He said, So this is the real appearance of the sword." Clatter as the black divine light rolled, the armor covering Lin Sun's body disappeared, and the sword in his hand returned to its original appearance. This is the armor of spiritual tattoos, a magical treasure. When you step into the saint realm, you can use the power of this treasure. Lin Sun handed the sword to Feng Zhe and warned him seriously. The armor of spiritual tattoos. Feng Zhe was shocked. He took the sword with both hands, and his face glowed with a different look. Lin Sun sighed with emotion. The armor of spiritual tattoos was a magical treasure that only Master Lu knew how to refine. Lin Sun had once refined such a treasure in Xiao Empire. After so many years, how could he not know the uniqueness of the armor of spiritual tattoos? It could be said that the armor of spiritual tattoos was unique in the whole world. Lin Sun was so excited because he saw through the secret of this sword. He knew that as long as he could find out the origin of this sword, he could definitely find Master Lu. Now, there was only one step left to achieve this goal. Find the weapon shop. Chapter 27-21. Hearing Lin Sun's words, the woman said bitterly, "Sage realm? It's too difficult for people like us to enter this realm." She sighed faintly. "Feng Zhe isn't a bad child. I know that he's not like those bastards who only know how to kill and rob. He's just doing it because he has to make a living. If he could reach the Sage Realm, he would at least be able to find a job on South Sea Island." "But now," Feng Zhe said, "Mother, don't worry. I will definitely become a sage in the future." Lin Sun thought for a moment, then pressed a finger on Feng Zhe's forehead. Immediately, Feng Zhe's sea of consciousness rumbled as if the world was turning upside down. When he woke up, there was an inheritance imprint in his sea of consciousness. "This is..." Feng Zhe was stunned. "An inheritance that can help you break through to the Sage Realm," Lin Sun said. Feng Zhe became excited and stammered incoherently, "Senior, why don't you kneel and thank your benefactor?" The woman was also pleasantly surprised and urged. Feng Zhe sighed and was about to kneel and kowtow when Lin Sun stopped him. "A real man doesn't bow to heaven or earth. If you're really grateful, then follow the right path and cultivate diligently. Don't make your mother sad and disappointed in the future. Lin Sun said seriously. Feng Zhe's lips trembled. He took a deep breath and nodded firmly. Lin Sun didn't know that because of today's events, this seemingly unremarkable youth would go through many years of battles and unify the Chaos Demon Sea, ending the turmoil and bloodshed of this sea. At that time, the world would call him the South Sea Sovereign. When talking about the past, the South Sea Sovereign would always think of today's meeting with Lin Sun. He often said to others, "Although I'm not Master Lin's disciple, we are master and disciple. If not for Master Lin, I wouldn't be who I am today." This was all in the future. After Lin Sun said goodbye to Feng Zhe and his mother, he turned around and left in a hurry. Although South Sea Island was huge, Lin Sun's consciousness allowed him to find the weapon shop in a short while. It was a simple courtyard made up of several houses piled up with boulders. It looked very unremarkable. In front of the stone house there was a banner with the words "Weapon Shop" written on it, but there was no specific name. In the main hall of the weapon shop, there were only a few customers, and there was no attendant to introduce them. There was only a man in gray sitting lazily behind the counter, dozing off. When Lin Sun came in, the man in gray only looked up at him for a moment and then withdrew his eyes. He said weakly, "Choose what you need." Lin Sun glanced around. The treasures displayed on the counter were dazzling and varied, but none of them were armors with spiritual tattoos. This made Lin Sun frown. Did I come to the wrong place? However, this was the only place on Southern Sea Island called the Smithy. "Shopkeeper, do you have such a treasure here?" Suddenly, a man in a white robe opened his mouth and took out a green umbrella that was only a foot long. Lin Sun's pupils shrank. Armor with spiritual tattoos. He immediately realized that the white-robed man was here for Master Lu, just like him, or the owner of the armor with spiritual tattoos. At the same time, Lin Sun also realized that these customers in the weapon shop were obviously with the white-robed man. At this moment, they all looked at the man in gray behind the counter. "No." The man in gray answered without raising his head. "Really?" The white-robed man was handsome and tall. When he opened and closed his eyes, there was a faint blue luster, which made him look strange and frightening. The man in gray behind the counter said impatiently, "I said no means no. If you're not here to buy weapons, you can leave now. You're courting death." A lean old man nearby stepped forward with an aggressive look in his eyes. "If you don't answer honestly, don't blame us for being rude." The man in gray sneered, "You should ask around. Since the opening of this weapon shop, which idiot has dared to make trouble here? If you have the guts, do it at your own risk." He seemed to have nothing to fear. The leading white-robed man frowned and said, "Do you know who we are? I don't care who you are. As long as you dare to make trouble here, you'll have to bear the consequences." The man in gray said rudely, "Ha ha, in this remote place, someone dares to threaten our 9th secluded demon sect?" Someone laughed. The 9th secluded demon sect. Lin Sun was surprised. This was one of the top 7 demon sects in Chaos Demon Sea. It was said that there were 18 old demons in the Emperor Ancestor realm, and a large number of fierce and ruthless people gathered in the sect. Now, people from the 9th secluded demon sect showed up here with a spiritual tattoo armor. Obviously, they didn't come with good intentions. However, this scene once again proved that his previous speculation was right. Master Lu was very likely to be lurking in this inconspicuous weapon shop. The 9th secluded demon sect? The face of the man in gray changed slightly. But it was not panic on his face, but a kind of surprise and surprise. "Yes, we're here to see the Taoist tattoo master who made this treasure. Since you know who we are, you should know the consequences of refusing us," the white-robed man said indifferently, with a trace of arrogance. The expression of the man in gray changed constantly. After a while, he sighed and said, "Well, I'll be merciful and let you see the Taoist tattoo master before you die." Before his voice died away, he gently knocked on the counter with his finger. Suddenly, a strange ripple of restriction spread throughout the hall. "You're courting death." The white-robed man's eyes narrowed, and he suddenly reached out his hand to catch the man in gray. But the man in gray grinned and scolded, "Idiot!" Then, his figure turned into a ray of illusory light and disappeared, making the white-robed man's grasp fail. Buzz! The power of the restriction surged and spread, and the white-robed man and the others felt the scene before their eyes change. Instantly, they felt as if they were in a world of darkness, boundless, and they couldn't see the end. Even with their strength, they couldn't find any flaws. All of a sudden, they were all nervous and were about to break the formation. Right at this moment, a rain of light flowed, and then a young man with a stiff expression and a cold and indifferent gaze appeared out of thin air. He was handsome, and his skin was bronze in color. His long gray hair was tied into a beautiful ponytail behind his head. He wore a neat, clean, and well-tailored crimson robe, which was bright red and dazzling. After he appeared, the crimson-robed young man's gaze descended onto the green umbrella in the white-robed man's hand, and he frowned slightly. "All of you killed the person who once possessed this treasure?" His voice was like the edge of a blade, and it revealed bone-piercing coldness. "Remove this grand formation, and we'll tell you," said the white-robed man coldly. "I don't need an answer. In any case, all of you deserve death." The crimson-robed young man's voice was indifferent as he stretched out his fair and slender finger and clenched lightly in the air. Numerous enormous black holes appeared in the world of restrictions, and they swallowed the white-robed man and the others one by one. It wasn't that these people didn't resist, but it was all in vain. The strange and terrifying devouring force created by the black holes devoured all their treasures and Tao techniques, and then they vanished without a trace. From the beginning until the end, the crimson-robed young man's expression didn't change in the slightest, and it was indifferent and stiff. He went silent for a moment before he stretched out his hand and gestured, and the green umbrella that was in the white-robed man's hand earlier fell into his hand. The crimson-robed young man went silent for a moment before he sighed lightly. "A good person like you has actually suffered misfortune. This ocean of anarchy is becoming more and more unpleasant to the eye." After that, his pupils narrowed slightly as he suddenly realized something. This restriction grand formation was missing a person. On an antique, quiet, and beautiful mountain peak, the gray-robed shopkeeper from before appeared out of thin air beneath an ancient pine tree at the mountainside, and he muttered, "So what if it's the 9th Hell Devil sect? Being targeted by junior brother Xian Fu is no different than giving your life away." Immediately, he shook his head and looked not far away. Beside a clear stream not far away, 2 children, a boy and a girl, were sitting opposite each other, playing chess on a chessboard with an extremely focused look. The gray-robed man stepped forward, glanced at them, and said with a smile, "Qing Feng, Qing Yu, it's been half a month. Haven't you won the game yet?" No one responded to him. Whether it was the boy called Qing Feng or the girl called Qing Yu, they were both determined, focused, and oblivious to their surroundings. The gray-robed man laughed happily and didn't care. But the next moment, his eyes widened and his smile froze. He cried as if he had seen a ghost, How did you get in?" Under the ancient pine tree not far away, Lin Sun's tall figure had already appeared. Hearing this, Lin Sun smiled and said, "Of course I walked in." The gray-robed man screamed, "It's impossible. The restriction power covering the entrance of the Mi Luo cave was set by my Grandmaster himself. Even immortal figures can't find it at all." Lin Sun thought of something and unfolded a picture of Master Lu. "Is he the Grandmaster you mentioned?" The gray-robed man only took a glance at it, and then he looked surprised and doubtful, saying, "Are you here for revenge?" "I'm here to look for someone." Lin Sun gazed at the tranquil and desolate mountain, feeling happy. He sighed with emotion, "What a nice place." The gray-robed man became more and more confused. He said angrily, "Can't you talk like a human? I'll call for help if you continue like this. I'm here for Master Lu, namely Lu Boya, who is probably the Grandmaster you mentioned. As long as I see him, everything will be clear." While saying this, Lin Sun stepped towards the two children who were playing chess. After a brief look, his eyes were in a trance. Integrating spiritual tattoos into the game of chess, Lin Sun deduced and perceived the mystery of spiritual tattoos. He couldn't be more familiar with this method of perceiving spiritual tattoos, because he often played such games with Master Lu when he was a child. One was to test his attainments in spiritual tattoos. The other was to give him pointers with the help of the flaws and problems exposed in the game. How could Lin Sun not sigh with emotion when he saw such a scene in front of him when he was a child? P.S. 3 chapters in a row. Only 3 chapters left to complete 10 chapters. Ladies and gentlemen, monthly votes. There are so few monthly votes today. Don't torture the goldfish like this. Chapter 27-22. With a flash of light and shadow, a figure appeared under the ancient pine. It was the red-robed young man with long gray hair and a handsome face. When he saw Lin Sun standing beside Qing Feng and Qing Yu, his eyes narrowed imperceptibly. Junior brother Xian Fu. The gray-robed man was delighted. Although Xian Fu ranked the last among his peers in Mi Lua Wonderland, he was the best in both spiritual tattoos and combat power. Immediately, the gray-robed man told Xian Fu about Lin Sun's actions after entering this place. Xian Fu frowned and stared at Lin Sun with a chilling look in his eyes. "Do you want to see our ancestor?" Lin Sun laughed and said, "Sure enough, Master Lu is your ancestor." At this moment, he couldn't hide his joy. It had been many years since he left the mine prison when he was young. Now he finally had a chance to meet Master Lu again, which made him overjoyed. "Master Lu," Xian Fu frowned, "our ancestor left Mi Lua Wonderland a few years ago. I advise you to go back." Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. "Where did your ancestor go?" Xian Fu asked in reply. "Why should I tell you?" The atmosphere was tense. The atmosphere became depressing. Lin Sun thought for a moment and said, "Do you suspect that I came here with bad intentions? Isn't that the case?" Xian Fu looked indifferent. Lin Sun suddenly smiled. He pointed at the chess game where Qing Feng and Qing Yu were playing and said, "How about this? Let's play a game of chess. If I win, you answer my question. If I lose, I will leave immediately." Xian Fu was stunned for a moment. "Are you sure? Friend, do you understand that this game is a test of spiritual tattoos?" The gray-robed man was also stunned and almost thought he heard wrong. Others might not know, but how could he not know that in the Tao of spirit markings, their Empyrean abode could absolutely be said to be unrivaled in the world? But now, someone came to play chess with the successor of Mi Lua Wonderland. It was like showing off one's slight skill in front of an expert and asking for humiliation. At this moment, the gray-robed man understood Xian Fu's feelings, and he understood why Xian Fu would be stunned for a moment and ask, "Are you sure?" In this Mi Luo Grotto heaven, anyone who heard such a request would probably feel it to be very absurd, right? Don't forget how I got in here. Lin Sun glanced at the gray-robed man with a smile. The gray-robed man was stunned at first, and then he seemed to understand and said, "Are you here to make trouble?" Lin Sun's smile froze and his lips twitched. "As I said, I just want to meet Master Lu." Xian Fu walked over from afar, and he picked up Qing Feng and Qing Yu from the chess game before handing them over to the gray-robed man. After that, he sat cross-legged at the side of the chessboard and said, "Let's begin." Obviously, he had agreed to Lin's conditions. Lin Sun also sat cross-legged. "Do you know the rules of chess?" the gray-robed man asked. "Be it the 3 talents duel, the 6 directions duel, the 9 palaces duel, the 36 celestial stars duel, or the 72 earthly fiends duel, they are all fine. Of course, if there are other duel rules, there's no harm in telling me now. I'll accept them one by one," Lin Sun said casually. The gray-robed man said in a daze, "You're so well prepared, And you still say you're not here to make trouble? Lin Sun really didn't want to talk to this guy anymore. His idea was so weird that he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You're a guest, so you can play. Choose one. Xian Fu looked indifferent, almost without any expression. Then let's play the 9 Palaces duel. Lin Sun didn't refuse. He picked up a black chess piece and knocked it on the chessboard. All of a sudden, a mysterious restriction formation emerged from the chessboard. The gray-robed man had profound attainments in spiritual tattoos. When he saw this scene, he couldn't help but be surprised and more convinced that Lin Sun came prepared. Or even with bad intentions. Standing on one side, Qing Feng and Qing Yu looked at this scene curiously. Qing Feng asked, "Martial Uncle Mu Wei, what's the special about this move?" The gray-robed man Mu Wei said casually, "This is the little yin-yang formation of 5 elements, a very common formation. Don't be too surprised. When the game is over, I'll replay the details of the whole game for you, and then explain it to you. Now you just watch it quietly. A true gentleman doesn't talk when watching a game." This was not only for Qing Feng and Qing Yu, but also for Lin Sun. The implication was that no one else would intervene in this game of chess. Xian Fu on the opposite side picked up a white chess piece and knocked it on a chessboard. Suddenly, an exquisite restriction formation appeared. Lin Sun nodded secretly. This Xian Fu's attainments in spiritual tattoos were really not simple. Thinking so, he picked up a black chess piece and knocked it on the chessboard again. Xian Fu also put down his chess piece. The two of them fought back and forth, and on the small chessboard, all sorts of wondrous restrictions and grand formations appeared, segregated into different squares. At first, Xian Fu didn't pay much attention to it, but gradually, he frowned slightly and realized that he had met a strong opponent. He didn't dare to neglect it and concentrated on the game. At the beginning, Mu Wei, who was watching the game, was full of confidence in Xian Fu. He thought that the guy who came to challenge the game was destined to suffer a heavy setback in a moment. But as the game gradually unfolded, his expression became dignified, and he even felt a little frightened. As for Qing Feng and Qing Yu, they were already dazzled. The game on the chessboard had completely exceeded the scope of their understanding. It was too mysterious and obscure. But they could see that as time went on, Xian Fu's chess pieces began to slow down. Later, he needed to think for a while before he put down a chess piece. Lin Sun was still very casual when he put down his chess pieces. He knocked them down almost without thinking. The brook was gurgling and the pines were rustling. But the quiet field was silent and depressing. Seeing that Xian Fu's chess speed was getting slower and slower, and the time he took to think was getting longer and longer, Qing Feng couldn't help but be a little anxious. He looked up at Mu Wei and opened his mouth to say something. But he was surprised to find that Mu Wei's forehead was covered with sweat, his eyes were wide open, and his eyebrows were full of surprise, shock, and a touch of unconcealable worry. It seemed that he was Xian Fu, and he was carrying out an extremely fierce battle in the game, and he was also suffering great pressure. It was also at this time that Qing Feng noticed that there were many figures nearby. All of these were the seniors of Mi Luo abode, and there were both men and women, young and old. All of them stood there silently as they stared at this match. There was more or less a touch of surprise on their faces. Obviously, they were also surprised by Lin's performance in this game. And when he saw a middle-aged man with a strange appearance in a feather robe in the crowd, Qing Feng almost cried out, "Don't make a sound so as not to disturb them." The middle-aged man raised his eyes and looked at Qing Feng. At the same time, his mellow and gentle voice also sounded in Qing Feng's heart. Then, the middle-aged man looked back at the chess game with a strange look on his face. When the game went on for 6 hours, Lin Sun suddenly looked up and said with a smile, "How about stopping here?" Xian Fu was silent for a moment and said with a dull look, "You don't have to give in. I don't want to win, but I want to know why I lost." Lin Sun nodded, "Okay." This time, it lasted less than an hour. Lin Sun looked up at Xian Fu again and said, "Thank you for letting me win." Xian Fu pursed his lips and was silent for a moment. Then he said, "I'm not as good as you, so I didn't let you win at all." At this moment, all the people who had been watching the game breathed a sigh of relief, as if they were relieving the tension and pressure in their hearts. Immediately, their expressions became complicated. Xian Fu was the most outstanding successor of this generation of the Mi Luo cave. His profound attainments in spiritual tattoos amazed many people. But now, he was defeated by a stranger. Who was this stranger? How terrifying was his attainment in the Tao of spiritual tattoos? How could this be? Mu Wei cried. He was at a loss and couldn't accept it. It's common to win or lose. What's more, the purpose of this game is to study and deduce spiritual tattoos. The purpose is to improve one's attainments in spiritual tattoos. For Xian Fu, it's a good thing that he was defeated this time. At this time, the middle-aged man in feather clothes with a strange appearance said in a warm voice. Everyone couldn't help nodding. Then, the middle-aged man looked at Lin Sun and said, "I'm Su Ruogu, currently the headmaster of the Mi Luo cave. Mu Wei has told me that you want to meet the founder of the Mi Luo cave?" Lin Sun got up and cupped his hands. "That's right." Su Ruogu thought for a while and said with a smile, "Although the founder is not here now, you must have something important to see. Please come with me to the main hall." "Thank you," Lin Sun said. Immediately, Su Ruogu led the way in front of Lin Sun and went to the top of the mountain. Mu Wei and other successors of the Mi Luo cave watched them leave and couldn't help whispering, "Who is that man? How could he have such attainments in spiritual tattoos? He said he came to see the founder. Did he know the founder before? This person is indeed powerful. His control over the Tao of spiritual runes has already reached an unimaginable level. It's far from what we can compare to. In my opinion, perhaps only the headmaster can suppress him." In the midst of this discussion, Xian Fu, who had been sitting there with a dull look, suddenly got up, and a frightening light surged in his eyes. "I probably know who he is." With that, his figure flashed, and he hurried to the top of the mountain. Everyone was stunned and confused. When they wanted to ask more questions, Xian Fu's figure had already disappeared. "Let's go and have a look." Mu Wei took the lead, and others also followed him to the top of the mountain. At the same time, there was an ancient hall standing in the clouds and mist on the top of the mountain. As soon as he came in, Su Ruogu turned around, cupped his hands to Lin Sun, and asked solemnly, "May I ask, are you child Lin Sun? P.S. Chapter 8 is here. Chapter 9 has been written halfway and can be sent out at about 10:30. Chapter 27-23. Su Ruogu came straight to the point and revealed Lin Sun's identity. Lin Sun was stunned and smiled. "Yes." Su Ruogu smiled and sighed with emotion. "Many years ago, Master once said that child Lin would come to see me in the future and asked me to pay attention to him. I never thought that I would see child Lin today. Come on, invite him in." Then, he invited Lin Sun to take a seat. He poured tea and some delicacies for Lin Sun. "These are some specialties of Chaos Demon Sea, which can't be found in the outside world. You can have a taste." Lin Sun was flattered and said, "You're too polite, senior." Su Ruogu laughed heartily. "My master is Master Lu. We are of the same generation. You can call me brother and I'll call you brother." Lin Sun readily accepted. After chatting for a while, Lin Sun couldn't help asking, "Brother, is Master Lu really not here?" Su Ruogu said, "About 60 years ago, my master left for the mysterious Forbidden Area, one of the 3 forbidden areas in Chaos Demon Sea. He hasn't returned since." The mysterious Forbidden Area. Lin Sun felt a chill in his heart. That was a place of great danger, like the primordial magnetic wind belt and the Aurora Cave. It was said that the mysterious Forbidden Area existed in Chaos Demon Sea in ancient times. It was suspected to be a secret place that didn't belong to this era. That place was covered in violent torrents of order all year round. The most incredible thing was that the torrents of order followed a mysterious track and evolved into numerous congenital prohibition formations. Just thinking about the restrictive formation that was formed from the power of order, one could imagine how terrifying the mysterious forbidden domain was. Before coming to South Sea Island, Lin Sun had thought about going to the mysterious forbidden area if he couldn't find Master Lu. In his opinion, the mysterious forbidden area might be terrifying, but it was undoubtedly full of temptation for a Taoist tattooist like Master Lu. After all, Lin Sun was very curious about the restriction formation formed by the torrent of order when he first heard about it. Did Master Lu say when he would come back? Lin Sun asked. Su Ruogu smiled as if he knew Lin Sun would ask this question. He said, "When Master left, he told me that if you want to see him, you need to complete some tests first." Test? Lin Sun was stunned. Since when did Master Lu become so mysterious? That's right. I was also curious as to why Master would do such a thing. However, Master said that if little brother could complete the test, you would understand. Su Ruogu smiled. Then he took out a jade talisman made of animal bone and handed it to Lin Sun. There are 2 tests. This is the first one. Lin Sun probed it with his spiritual awareness and immediately understood. This first test was actually to head to one of the chaotic Devil Sea's 3 great restricted areas, the Origin Magnetic Wind Belt, and gather 50 tons of Origin Magnetic Divine Iron. It looked simple, but one has to know that the Magnetic Wind Belt is a place of great danger. It is filled with an incomparably strange spatial order. Legend has it that even undying beings who enter will be instantly torn to shreds by the spatial order. It was obvious how dangerous it was to enter and gather the divine magnetism iron within. Of course, Lin Sun could choose not to enter it, because every once in a while, a tide of power would break out in the magnetic wind belt. At that time, some magnetic iron would be washed out and spread to the outside world. In that case, Lin Sun didn't know how long it would take to collect the magnetic wind belt. To be honest, I was surprised when I learned about the first test. The magnetic wind belt is so dangerous that even immortals will die if they enter it. Master's test is to Su Ruogu coughed. He didn't dare to question and judge Master's practice. It's a bit difficult, but since it's a test, Master Lu must have a deep meaning. Lin Sun thought for a moment and asked with a smile, "Brother, what's the second test?" Su Ruogu said, "The second test is hidden in Master's place of retreat. After you complete the first test, I will take you there." Lin Sun nodded and stood up, saying, "Without further ado, I'll go to the magnetic wind belt now." Su Ruogu was surprised. "You've just arrived. Why don't you stay here for a few days and then set off?" Lin Sun declined with a smile. Seeing this, Su Ruogu no longer urged him to stay. He said, "Brother, the Chaos Demon Sea is chaotic and turbulent. If you need any help, you can tell me. Although our Mi Luo Wonderland has been living in seclusion here for many years, we are never afraid of offending anyone with our means." His words were full of domineering. Obviously, all the Tao inscription masters that possessed extraordinary attainments in the Tao of spirit markings gathered in the Mi Luo abode, and merely the Tao inscription restrictions they set up was sufficient to cause any great power to be unable to endure it. Lin Sun said with a smile, "If there's a need, I will definitely ask." With that, the two had walked out of the hall. Outside the hall, Xian Fu in a red robe with an indifferent look had obviously been waiting for a while. When he saw Lin Sun coming out, he immediately took a deep breath and asked, "You are Lin Sun?" Lin Sun felt a little strange, but he still nodded and said, "Yes. I hope you won't let me down." Xian Fu's eyes were filled with complex emotions. After that, he turned around and left. Lin Sun was confused. What did he mean? "Brother, Xian Fu's surname is Luo." Su Ruogu next to him explained in a low voice. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes. Was he a descendant of Luo family? But why was he here? Su Ruogu said, Master said that Xian Fu is a descendant of the main branch of Luo family. He was in a difficult situation in Luo family and suffered a lot of grievances and torture. Many years ago, Master took him back to the Mi Luo Wonderland and personally taught him spiritual tattoos. This child is extremely talented, especially in the understanding of spiritual tattoos. He is unparalleled among his peers. He is already a veritable grandmaster of Taoist tattoos. Lin Sun understood now. Luo family was divided into two groups, the main branch and the branch. His mother, Luo Qingxuan, was a direct descendant of the main branch. However, since Luo Tongtian disappeared mysteriously, when Luo Qingxuan's father, Luo Shao, inherited the position of patriarch, there was a shocking change. The position of patriarch was usurped by Luo Chong, the leader of the branch. Since then, the old people of the main branch of Luo family had been suppressed and imprisoned. Under such circumstances, it could be imagined that as a descendant of the main branch of Luo family, even if he lived in Luo family, his situation was doomed to be bad. Luo Xian Fu was undoubtedly such an example. In the past years, people of Luo family killed by Lin Sun, such as Luo Yunshan and Luo Yuni, were all big shots of the branch of Luo family. I hope I won't let you down. Thinking of Luo Xian Fu's words just now, Lin Sun couldn't help but be stunned. Did this kid want to take revenge on Luo family through him? He asked, "Fellow practitioner, are there any other descendants of Luo family in the Mi Luo Wonderland besides Luo Xian Fu?" No. After all, this is the Chaos Demon Sea, and Master's identity is a bit special. Once the news is leaked, I'm afraid there will be enemies, Su Ruogu said. Enemies? Those guys from the branch of Luo family? Lin Sun asked. Not just them. Su Ruogu sighed. I don't know much about these things, and Master never tells me. When you meet Master in the future, ask him, and you may know the answer. Lin Sun nodded. Fellow practitioner, please don't disclose my identity for the time being. In contrast, I have more enemies than Master Lu. Su Ruogu was speechless and then said seriously, Don't worry. On the same day, Lin Sun left the Mi Luo Wonderland and disappeared from Nanhai Island. 7 days later, in the outer area of the magnetic wind belt, whoosh waves of terrible magnetic storms swept across, making harsh roars. The space was completely torn apart, and the world showed a messy and dilapidated scene. This was just the outer area. Far away in the distance, the magnetic wind belt was like a gigantic and boundless dragon, coiling between the heavens and the earth. It was formed from black magnetic energy, transforming into a terrifying wind belt that floated there, becoming one of the 3 great forbidden areas that would cause one's expression to change at the mere mention of it since ancient times. It was said that the mysterious magnetic mountain was in the deepest part of the magnetic wind belt. When Lin Sun arrived, he happened to encounter the magnetic tide that would break out every once in a while. Looking from afar, the magnetic wind belt produced a strange swallowing force, as if it was breathing. As it swallowed, the shattered spatial currents were all dragged into the magnetic wind belt, causing the space there to show a state of destruction and collapse. When the magnetic wind belt was released, the rolling black magnetic force rushed out like a volcanic eruption and spread out, turning the world upside down. This was the magnetic tide, a kind of strange natural disaster. It was said that it was produced by a mysterious force of space order. Just looking at it from a distance, Lin Sun couldn't help but be frightened, and his expression became solemn. However, he also noticed that in the operation of the magnetic tide, from time to time, dazzling cold black light swept out of the magnetic wind belt, cut through the sky, and flew towards the outer area. Looking carefully, it was a piece of black stone of different shapes, with a metallic luster. This was the magnetic divine stone. Every piece of magnetic divine stone contained magnetic divine iron, which was a rare treasure, and could even be used as a divine material to refine immortal Taoist soldiers. Moreover, every time an origin magnetic divine stone flashed out, there would be people flashing out explosively from different parts of the outer area, and they fought to seize it. More often than not, bloody battles and killings were unavoidable. Just like at this time, Lin Sun's arrival had aroused the vigilance of many practitioners in the nearby area, and they didn't conceal their killing intent at all. Obviously, they also regarded him as a competitor. Lin Sun didn't pay attention to this at all, and just stood there alone. Those magnetic divine stones washed out in the magnetic tide, compared with the amount of 100,000 kilograms, were simply a drop in the bucket, and couldn't arouse Lin Sun's interest in fighting for them at all. Looking at the magnetic tide that was erupting from a distance, he was deducing in his mind how to break into the magnetic wind belt. P.S. Send the 9th update. Try to send the 10th update before dawn. Chapter 27-24. Swoosh. While Lin Sun was pondering, a jet black and dazzling light flashed out from the distant magnetic wind zone and rushed towards him. It was a divine magnetic stone, and it was the size of a cattail leaf fan. As soon as it appeared, a few figures rushed out from the nearby area, and they flashed towards the divine magnetic stone from different directions. On the other hand, Lin Sun's position was the closest to the origin magnetism godstone that was flying over. So, when these cultivators attacked, Lin Sun was instantly affected. Rumble. Taoist swords, sabers, divine seals, halberds. All sorts of treasures were mixed with various Taoist techniques and enveloped over, and they emanated dazzling and boundlessly violent radiance. Lin Sun frowned. His figure stood still on the spot while an invisible force spread out from his body. Bang! The heavens and the earth seemed to collapse. All the treasures that glowed with brilliant lights and all sorts of mysterious and unfathomable Taoist techniques seemed as if they'd been crushed by a storm, and they exploded in the void, causing a rain of light to spray and rumble incessantly. The figures of those cultivators that charged over swiftly transformed into ashes in the void as well. How terrifying! Who's this person? In the distance, some cultivators that witnessed this scene stiffened, and they were shocked by this bloody and overbearing scene, causing the restless thoughts in their hearts to vanish. Amidst this silence, Lin Sun stretched out his hand and fished out the divine magnetic stone that flashed towards him. It was so heavy. In an instant, Lin Sun's palm sank, and he felt as if he was holding up a mountain that weighed more than 30,000 kilograms. But this was a divine magnetic stone. As Lin Sun exerted force with his fingertips, stone chips flew in the air, and the jet-black stone that was the size of a cattail leaf fan was gradually cut open layer by layer. In the end, only a pigeon egg-sized and dazzling piece of divine iron remained, and it emanated a shocking magnetic force that caused the nearby void to distort and collapse, causing shattered spatial ripples. This was divine magnetic iron. It was said to be a rare treasure that could only be seen in the Sea of Anarchy. However, the expression in Lin Sun's eyes became strange. The previous divine magnetic stone was as heavy as a mountain, but this pigeon egg-sized piece of divine magnetic iron was as light as a feather, and it only weighed a few kilograms at most. Now Lin Sun finally had a deep understanding of this test. 50,000 kilograms of divine magnetic iron was absolutely an extremely huge amount. If he didn't enter the origin magnetic wind belt and just relied on collecting them in the outer regions, who knew how many years it would take to gather enough? Young man, I'm Long Feng from the 9 Underworlds demon sect. If you're willing, I can use the Zhou Void Origin Crystal to buy the Origin Magnetic Divine Metal in your hand. A heavy voice that rumbled like thunder sounded out from afar, and then a tall and mighty figure sat upright on a throne of bones that floated in midair. His blood-red hair fluttered as crimson lightning surged in his eyes, and the might of his ancestor realm body was extremely terrifying. Long Feng. This name might be unfamiliar, but in the chaotic demon sea, as long as the 1,000-eyed demon ancestor was mentioned, there was absolutely no one who did not know of it. Its ferocious reputation was sufficient to cause one's expression to change upon mentioning it. Obviously, Long Feng had his eyes on the divine magnetic iron in Lin Sun's hand. The gazes of many people nearby turned subtle. Recently, Long Feng had been overseeing this place alone. He did not make a move to snatch the origin magnetic divine iron. However, as long as he took a liking to the origin magnetic divine iron, he would open his mouth and make a transaction with the other party. Even if the price he offered was extremely low, even to the extent that it was no different from open robbery, no one dared to refuse such a transaction. Otherwise, Long Feng would use his ancestor realm cultivation to teach them how to behave. Lin Sun did not know this, and even if he knew, he would not care much. "How many eternal void source crystals are you going to offer?" he asked casually. On the throne of bones, Long Feng smiled slightly and stretched out a finger. 100 million? Lin Sun said. Some of the cultivators nearby almost laughed out loud. This guy really dared to dream. Long Feng was also stunned, and his expression became cold. "I originally intended to offer 1 million, but now I've changed my mind. At most, I will give you 10,000. This was no longer a bargaining, but a kind of humiliation and threat. Lin Sun said, "You should have used this method to obtain a lot of origin magnetic divine iron during this period of time, right?" Everyone could not help but feel sad as they thought of the origin magnetic divine iron that Long Feng had robbed during this period of time. Long Feng frowned. "What are you trying to say?" Lin Sun smiled. "Robbery?" Swish. His figure disappeared into thin air, and the next moment, he appeared in front of Long Feng. "You're courting death." Long Feng's body erupted with unparalleled power. Just as he was about to get up from the throne of bones, he was suppressed by an invisible palm force. His expression changed abruptly, and he tried his best to resist. However, the strength of the palm was unbelievably strong, and it shattered his hands and arms, causing blood and flesh to splatter everywhere. In the end, the strength of the palm directly enveloped his body, causing his entire body to explode, and the white bone throne behind him also exploded. The thousand-eyed demon ancestor, a notorious emperor ancestor of the 9 Serenities demon sect, was slapped to death just like that. The bloody scene made everyone dumbfounded, and they stood there in a daze. Lin Sun, however, seemed to have done a very ordinary thing, and he reached out to collect Long Feng's belongings. After a quick look, he found more than 30 pieces of origin magnetic divine iron of different sizes. This was a lot, but the total weight was only a pitiful 5 kilograms. "It seems that I can only go to the origin magnetic wind to take it away." Lin Sun was speechless for a while. He thought that he had cheated an old fellow who was rich, but who would have thought that he was a poor man? Of course, this was Lin Sun's personal opinion. In the eyes of other cultivators, a ruthless person like Long Feng who relied on forced buying and selling was really overflowing with wealth. Swish! In the next moment, Lin Sun had already started to move. Facing the fluctuation of the origin magnetic tide, he swept towards the extremely distant origin magnetic wind. When the cultivators who were shocked by Lin Sun's bloody means saw this scene, they were stunned and couldn't believe it. What is this guy going to do? What else can he do? He must go to the origin magnetic wind to have a try. What's the difference between this and death? That's a place that even immortals don't dare to set foot in easily. In the midst of the discussion, Lin Sun's tall figure quickly disappeared. Boom! The turbulent origin magnetic storm swept out, producing a terrifying tearing force that could tear the space and destroy the world, and it constantly attacked Lin Sun. His whole body glowed, and he released his cultivation to the extreme. Moreover, he operated the power of the abyssal sword cauldron, covering his whole body. When the origin magnetic storm attacked, there was a violent collision sound, and a rain of light splashed. Lin Sun moved with difficulty. Although he suffered a terrifying impact, the the terrifying destructive force was resolved one by one. When he arrived at the origin magnetic wind, a strange and terrifying power of space rushed over mixed with the origin magnetic storm. At a glance, the space was inverted, chaotic, and shattered origin magnetic storm was everywhere. Such a terrifying scene could even make immortals tremble. Lin Sun couldn't help but shiver, but he didn't panic. Buzz! The abyssal sword cauldron whizzed out, scattering hundreds of millions of rays of light. The Nirvana order that was silent within it was also stirring at this moment, as if it had awakened. Go! Lin Sun's figure spread out, and he rushed towards the origin magnetic wind. Boom! The endless space fragments mixed with the turbulence of the origin magnetic storm swept and roared, and the power produced was so strong that it could easily tear an immortal into pieces. And Lin Sun's figure was like a ray of light in the storm, moving forward shakily, as if it would be extinguished at any time. But every time he encountered a terrifying impact, the Nirvana order would emerge, and devour the space order mixed in the origin magnetic storm until not a single drop was left, allowing Lin Sun to resolve the disaster again and again without any mishap. And this benefited the order spirit Wu Shuang in the abyssal sword cauldron. As the Nirvana order continued to devour the strange space order, it was like feeding her delicious food and nourishment, and all of it was absorbed and refined by her. A quarter of an hour, half an hour, 3/4 of an hour. As he went deeper, Lin Sun felt as if he was walking in a broken and messy chaotic world. There were black magnetic storms everywhere, cracks everywhere, and the power of the order of space was flying everywhere. Apart from that, there was nothing else. After an unknown period of time, in Lin Sun's vision, he could vaguely see the vague outline of a divine mountain, but it was completely dark, and he couldn't see it clearly at all. After moving forward for a full 10 minutes, Lin Sun finally saw that strange mountain. It was shaped like a huge millstone, incomparably black, about 1,000 feet high, and the top of the mountain was flat. It slowly rotated in the chaotic void, and as it rotated, the surging power of the origin magnetic storm spread out like a thick torrent, and even the void was crushed to the point of distorting, collapsing, and collapsing. It really was like a huge black millstone that lay there, and when it rotated slowly, it produced a crushing power that could simply obliterate all things in the world. When he saw this mountain, Lin Sun couldn't help but gasp. There was no doubt that this was the most mysterious origin magnetic mountain in the rumors. He finally understood why the essence-fused wind belt was filled with a strange power of spatial order. It was like a cage that firmly imprisoned the essence-fused divine mountain in this place. At the same time, it endured the crushing force produced by the essence-fused divine mountain. Otherwise, the origin magnetic mountain would have been moved away from here long ago. At that time, everywhere the divine origin magnetic mountain passed, everything in the world would be completely obliterated by the terrifying energy of the origin magnetic mountain. In short, it was the strange space order that restricted the origin magnetic mountain, making it only able to float in this area, so that the phenomenon of the origin magnetic wind belt appeared. If I take this space order, wouldn't it be equivalent to breaking the cage that trapped the origin magnetic mountain? At that time, the entire Chaos Demon Sea would probably suffer a great disaster. Lin Sun's black eyes were deep, and his mind was full of thoughts. However, if I can take away the entire origin magnetic mountain, all this disaster will not happen, and I can also subdue the space order along the way. And while thinking, he had already approached the origin magnetic mountain in the distance. Even with the protection of the abyssal sword cauldron, Lin Sun at this moment seemed extremely careful and cautious, because after careful observation, he came to a conclusion. The crushing power produced by the slow rotation of the origin magnetic mountain could definitely easily obliterate an immortal figure. How could he dare to be careless? The 10th update was delivered. The goal of explosive updates was successfully achieved. Those who waited for the explosive updates to finish before voting could vote now. Also, Please pay attention to Goldfish. I will release content and updates related to the chosen ones every day.